Chapter 540. These external items were enough to protect anyone, but the prerequisite was that one had money, and the Nalan family fit the bill perfectly. To Lu Yin, the richer one was, the stronger one was, and the stronger one was, the more money one needed. He planned to use battle to support battle, or else he would never be able to gather enough money to upgrade his gun and universal armor. All right. Madam, you can seek refuge in the Great Yu Empire. I don't dare to guarantee that I can protect you, but I will definitely do my best to protect you, Lu Yin promised. Madam Nalan was delighted. Thank you, Student Lu. We're already on our way to Frostwave Weave, and we'll reach Xenu Star in at most a month. Please take care of us then. Lu Yin nodded and ended the call. With the innerverse and outerverse separated, the pressure and threats from the innerverse's great powers instantly disappeared. Lu Yin was filled with pride as he wanted to make use of this time to achieve something. At the very least, he wanted to establish a power that the Blaze Realm's great powers would fear. Frostwave Weave was definitely not his final destination. On the other end, Madame Nalan put down the call with a solemn expression, as the pressure she was facing was even greater than what she had shown. She had known that things were not good the moment the innerverse and outerverse had been separated, and she had immediately contacted the Enlighter from the Nalan family. However, she had discovered that she could not reach them. Tyrannical Weave had been isolated, and the Nalan family had lost the protection of an Enlighter. She was well aware of what it meant for the wealthiest corporation in the outerverse to lose their protection. Thus, when she had learned that Lu Yin had forced Huahui to retreat and killed Karthika, she had immediately decided to head to Frostwave Weave to seek protection. She was not sure if Lu Yin would protect the Nalan family, but this was their only hope. It was better than placing her hopes on those insatiable Enlighters. She had interacted with Lu Yin a few times and she had saved his life. She was betting that he would not be ungrateful. I hope we can escape this calamity. Madame Nalan looked into the dark sky. The future of the Nalan family depended on Lu Yin. She smiled bitterly as she had never thought that there would be a day when she would have to rely on this person. She had once saved his life, but now she had to rely on him. On Xenu Star, in the Imperial Palace's palace, all of the ministers who were qualified to participate in the court session had gathered. Only Undying Yushan's throne was empty. Lu Yin slowly sat down next to the throne and scanned the ministers. Ever since he had killed Karthika, Lu Yin's status in the Great Yu Empire had completely changed. If Undying Yushan had relied on His Majesty to govern the empire, then Lu Yin had relied on his invincible strength. He was even more powerful than Undying Yushan. Undying Yushan's decisions were opposed by some, but Lu Yin's decisions were not opposed by anyone. For example, the establishment of the Lu Ministry of Staff had been vetoed by all 5 cabinet ministers, but Lu Yin had ignored it. This was the power that came with strength, and it was completely different from Undying Yushan's. After the routine report, the meeting was already halfway through. Garop stood up. Your Highness, I would like to request that you abolish the Lu Ministry of Staff on behalf of the Imperial Cabinet. We request Your Highness to abolish the Lu Ministry of Staff, the other 4 cabinet ministers said in unison, bowing to Lu Yin. Lu Yin coldly replied, There's no need to discuss this matter. Leave. Garop was helpless. The royal regent was too tyrannical and his words were absolute. There was nothing they could do. The establishment of the Lu Ministry of Staff had split the authority of the Imperial Cabinet, and it had already become an established fact. Fortunately, the woman named Huan Sha still did not have the qualifications to attend the meeting. The Lu Ministry of Staff was more like an aide to the royal regent, and she had not yet entered the official ranks. This was something that the cabinet could accept for the time being. After Garop, no one else reported anything. Lu Yin calmly asked, Is that all you wanted to say? That's all. Everyone fell silent. Since that's all, it's my turn. Lu Yin's gaze swept past everyone before finally settling on Hu Qingshan and the other captains of the 13 Imperial squadrons. I need to unify Frostwave Weave within a month. His words shook the entire court and all the ministers looked at Lu Yin in shock. In actuality, the Great Yu Empire had already unified more than half of Frostwave Weave, which had a total of 125 filaments. The Great Yu Empire had already occupied 100 of them and had even appointed officials, but in the end, they had withdrawn from those areas due to economic problems. The Great Yu Empire's military budget could not keep up, and forcefully occupying those areas could cause the empire's economy to collapse, which would lead to serious consequences. After that, the Innerverse's various powers had occupied North Castle Weave, and the Great Yu Empire's military had not dared to leave. Your Highness, the military budget is not enough to unify Frostwave Weave, Finance Minister Gavin said nervously. Lu Yin calmly replied, put all of our expenses into the military and postpone everything else. Someone will pay for us in a month. Gavin was shocked. Does Your Highness mean that someone will pay for the military? Lu Yin did not deny it. All right. According to Undying Yushan's previous strategy, we'll unify Frostwave Weave within a month. That shouldn't be a problem, right? No problem, Your Highness. Xianxia was the first to express his opinion. After that, the other captains of the 13 Imperial squadrons all expressed their opinions. Even Peach had a serious expression on her face, which made her look rather comical. In the eastern region of the Outerverse, more than 10 weaves were embroiled in chaos. Enlighters had wantonly plundered resources, causing public outrage. However, those weaves' powers had been unable to resist. In comparison, Frostwave Weave was much more peaceful. However, following Lu Yin's orders, Frostwave Weave was plunged into the flames of war. The Great Yu Empire's military poured out in full force and swept through the entire Frostwave Weave. The Great Yu Empire had already occupied 100 filaments in the past, and now, it was like they were revisiting their old stomachs. This was too easy for the Great Yu Empire's military. As for Lu Yin, he summoned Tianming. After pleading guilty, Tianming had been imprisoned by Lu Yin in the Yu Academy on the first ring, and he was not allowed to leave. He had thought that he would be imprisoned for a long time, but he had not expected Lu Yin to summon him after just a few days. Sinner Tianming greets Your Highness, the Royal Regent. Tianming bowed to Lu Yin. Lu Yin looked down at him. I'll give you a chance to redeem yourself. If you do well, you'll be a citizen of the Great Yu Empire from now on, and everything that happened in the past will be written off. Tianming excitedly raised his head. Thank you, Your Highness. Don't be in such a hurry to thank me. This matter isn't that easy. Lu Yin then had Tianming stand up and say, I need you to use your status as the successor of the Nine-Stack sect to summon all of the surviving experts from the sect and start a war to retake the sect. Tianming was shocked. Your Highness, what do you mean? Lu Yin looked at Tianming. The one who destroyed the Nine-Stack sect was Lei Long of the Dire Barbarian clan. I need you to take revenge and retake the Nine-Stack sect. Of course, I know that you won't be able to do it, so I'll help you. Tianming was not stupid, and Lu Yin's intentions could not be any simpler. He wanted Tianming to gather the people from the Nine-Stack sect to deal with Lei Long, and then use Lei Long to destroy those people. Then Tianming would publicly request Lu Yin's help as the successor of the Nine-Stack sect. This would truly destroy the people from the Nine-Stack sect, and it would also give Lu Yin an excuse to openly meddle in Grand Top Weave's affairs. This was using Lei Long to destroy those stubborn disciples of the Nine-Stack sect in Grand Top Weave, and then using the excuse of righteousness to invade Grand Top Weave. If Tianming did this, then he would become a sinner of Grand Top Weave, and he would be the one who had lured Lu Yin into Grand Top Weave. He would also be the one who had personally helped Lu Yin find the surviving disciples of the Nine-Stack sect, and he would also be the one who had destroyed any hope of the Nine-Stack sect's revival. Tianming's expression fluctuated as he had not expected Lu Yin to ask him to do such a thing. Lu Yin looked at him. What, you're not willing? Tianming's gaze was complicated and he lowered his head. The Nine-Stack sect has already been destroyed and you know that. Otherwise, you wouldn't have taken the initiative to confess. I'm taking revenge for the Nine-Stack sect, so you should thank me. Tianming took a deep breath and slowly exhaled. Yes, Your Highness. Lu Yin's lips curled up and he patted Tianming's shoulder. Very good. I'll pass on the Nine-Stacks technique to you. With this, no one will doubt your identity as the successor of the Nine-Stack sect. After a period of time, Tianming left for Grand Top Weave. Lu Yin was not worried that Tianming would betray him, as where could he go if he betrayed Lu Yin? There was no place for him in Grand Top Weave or Frostwave Weave. The fact that Tianming had taken the initiative to confess proved that he could not abandon Frostwave Weave. He was afraid that he would be found out in the future, which was why he had taken the initiative to confess. Such a person could not be abandoned. What Lu Yin needed to consider now was how to deal with Lei Long. Killing Karthika was not enough to satisfy Lu Yin, as the benefits of killing Karthika were enough to make him jealous. Lei Long should be wealthier than Karthika, as he had plundered the 9-stack sect's resources for countless years. With these resources and the support of the Nalan family, Lu Yin was confident that he could challenge a powerhouse with a power level of over 300,000. Of course, that was only if such a powerhouse existed in the Outerverse. In other words, if he could kill Lei Long, not only would he be able to seize control of Grand Topweave, but he would also be able to instill fear in other Enlighters who would not dare to provoke him. He would also be able to increase his strength, killing many birds with one stone. However, Lu Yin had once killed Karthika, so Lei Long would not be careless in front of him. Lu Yin raised his gadget as it was time for someone to fulfill their promise. Most of the Enlighters who had participated in the battle on planet Pyrolite had been left behind in the Outerverse. Northline Flowzone's Lily family's Granny Chan was one of them, and Lu Yin was looking for her. During this period of time, the Great Yu Empire had sent out people to investigate. Northline Flowzone's Granny Chan had now occupied Flaxen Weave, and she had destroyed the Weave's former ruler. Flaxen Weave was separated from Frostwave Weave by Lars Weave, which was not too far away. Lily had already returned to the Innerverse, and Lu Yin could not contact her. However, it was not difficult for him to contact someone from Northline Flowzone. Half a day later, Lu Yin clicked on the call, and a screen appeared in front of him. Granny Chan's weathered face appeared. Junior Lu Yin has disturbed Senior, Lu Yin said respectfully. Granny Chan looked at Lu Yin in amazement. She had heard that this person had killed Karthika and forced Huahui to retreat. Although he was only a Limiter, he was someone who could stand shoulder to shoulder with them, even if he had relied on external items. You don't have to be so polite. Back then, my Northline Flowzone made a promise that as long as you helped me, I would help you to the best of my ability. Are you planning on using that promise? Granny Chan asked, getting straight to the point. Lu Yin nodded and solemnly said, the dire barbarian clan's Lei Long has invaded Grand Topweave, and his next target will be my Frostwave Weave. Junior boldly asks Senior to join forces with me to eliminate Lei Long and relieve Frostwave Weave of its worries. Granny Chan's gaze turned solemn. You want to eliminate Lei Long? Lu Yin nodded and stared at Granny Chan without showing any signs of weakness. Chapter 541. Granny Chan frowned. Little brother, an Enlighter isn't that easy to deal with. Lu Yin was helpless. I know, but Lei Long has already made Frostwave Weave his next target. If I don't act, then I'll just be waiting for death. Rather than waiting for death, I might as well take a gamble. With Senior's help and the weapon that my master gave me, I'm 90% certain that I can kill Lei Long. Granny Chan's expression changed. Master? Which powerhouse is your master? Lu Yin smiled bitterly. I don't know. I only know that my master once threw me from Tempest Flowzone to Chaos Flowzone. Granny Chan was shocked, and she even found it hard to believe. This was a distance that spanned half of the Innerverse. Not even Northgate Taisui could do such a thing, let alone her. Crossing the Innerverse was not as simple as crossing the Outerverse. There were countless powerhouses in the Innerverse, and they could pierce through the void. To be able to cross half of the Innerverse under the watchful eyes of countless powerhouses meant that one's strength was unimaginably terrifying. When she saw Lu Yin's confused expression, Granny Chan was certain that this brat had no idea how difficult it was to accomplish such a feat. It was no wonder why this brat's weapon could kill an Enlighter. To such a powerhouse, Enlighters were like ants. Unfortunately, the Innerverse and Outerverse were now separated, and no matter how strong his master was, it was useless. Of course, no one could be certain of the future, and the Astral River might recover after a while. Granny Chan suppressed her shock and smiled. Many reclusive seniors don't want to reveal their names, and that's normal. Little brother's master is one of them, but now that the Innerverse and Outerverse are separated, no one can come out. What a pity. Lu Yin sighed. Yes, or else I would have asked my master to take action. Granny Chan pondered for a moment before meeting Lu Yin's expectant gaze. All right, I'll accompany you, but not to deal with Lei Long. I'll just intimidate him. I'll make him retreat, but at the same time, I hope that you won't provoke the dire barbarian clan again. She had not forgotten Lu Yin's ability to cause trouble. During the battle on planet Pyrolite, This brat had offended most of the Innerverse powers. Otherwise, Karthika would not have been in such a hurry to deal with him. Lu Yin hurriedly assured her, and only then was Granny Chan satisfied. The two agreed to visit Grand Top Weave in a month's time. After ending the call, Lu Yin relaxed. With Granny Chan around, he could finally act without worry. Even if he couldn't kill Lei Long wouldn't be able to do anything to him either. With progenitor Wuxiang's hide, Lu Yin was confident that he could create an opportunity for himself, just like Karthika. Karthika had also been on guard against Lu Yin, but he had still been ambushed by progenitor Wuxiang's hide. Lei Long was no exception. However, Lu Yin needed to first take a look at Lei Long's rune lines. There was a difference between a power level of 210,000 and a power level of 290,000. Lu Yin didn't know what Lei Long's power level was, but he would know in a month's time. In the worst-case scenario, Lu Yin wouldn't be able to kill Lei Long, but Lei Long would also be intimidated by Granny Chan and not dare to make a move against Frostwave Weave. A month passed by very quickly, and during this time Frostwave Weave was not peaceful at all. The Great Yu Empire's army rampaged through the Weave and started a war. The captains of the 13 Imperial squadrons were invincible, and even hunters were intimidated by Lu Yin's battle record of killing Enlighters, so they were forced to retreat. The war against Frostwave Weave was progressing smoothly. A month later, the entire Frostwave Weave was nominally under the Great Yu Empire's control. However, after unifying Frostwave Weave, a problem arose. The Great Yu Empire did not have enough people to manage the various regions, which gave Lu Yin a headache. Helpless, he could only temporarily recruit talents from various regions to manage the military and political affairs. But this was not a long-term solution. These people did not belong to the Great Yu Empire in the first place, and it was easy for them to rebel. Furthermore, they were not under control. Lu Yin asked the cabinet to think of a solution, but the cabinet could not come up with any good ideas for the time being. However, they did come up with a solution that was not really a solution, and that was to bring the immediate family members of the appointed officials of the various regions to Xenu Star and arrange for them to live and study there. These people were hostages. Lu Yin did not want to use hostages to threaten them, but Frostwave Weave was just too large, and the slightest lapse in management could lead to unpredictable events. This was just Frostwave Weave, and in the future Lu Yin's territory would not be limited to just Frostwave Weave. It should be known that Undying Yushan had not only formulated a strategic plan to unify Frostwave Weave, but he had also set his sights on the surrounding weaves. It was just that he had not had the time to come up with a proper plan. The Great Yu Empire needed to nurture military and political talents as quickly as possible, and this was a top priority for the empire. Another emergency was the economy. Since the empire's treasury had allocated most of its resources to the military, the empire's economy was unable to operate normally, and many departments were even paralyzed. If this continued, it would lead to even greater chaos. There were already many merchants who were deliberately raising the prices of their products in order to earn huge profits. This situation would only worsen, and they needed to have a huge economy to keep the prices down. Lu Yin contacted Madame Nalan several times, and finally the Nalan family arrived at Xenu Star. In outer space, the Nalan family's enormous spacecraft appeared. Lu Yin personally welcomed them, and behind him Finance Minister Gavin whispered, "Your Highness, the Nalan family must be deliberately delaying their arrival. They know that the Empire's economy is in danger, and they're using this to raise their status." Lu Yin did not reply, as if Gavin could understand what was going on. There was no way that he could not. This was just a ploy, just like how many people would only appear at the last moment to save someone's life in order to emphasize their importance. As long as the consequences were not too severe, such a ploy would not affect the big picture. You understand the Empire's economy better than I do. If we talk about this later, you'll be the one to explain, Lu Yin said. Gavin softly acknowledged. Xenu Star's space station. On this day, all of the spacecraft had been cleared out to welcome the Nalan family. This was Lu Yin's way of showing respect to the Nalan family. Within the giant spacecraft, Madame Nalan's lips curled up into a smile. The spacecraft shuddered and the hatch opened. Madame Nalan was the first to walk out, and Lu Yin immediately went up to her. "Madam, did your journey go smoothly?" After Lu Yin left, the group that had followed him to welcome the Nalan family was stunned by her beauty. This woman had never acted coquettishly, but her attractiveness had not diminished in the slightest. Madame Nayland smiled and exchanged a few pleasantries with him. She listened to him introduce the group of people from the Great Yu Empire, and when he was done she waved her hand and a maid from the Nayland family stepped forward and handed Gavin an exquisite box. Gavin was astonished. Lu Yin looked at Madame Nayland. She smiled. "Your Highness Royal Regent, this is a small token of our Nayland family's appreciation for the Great Yu Empire. Please accept it." Lu Yin had not expected Madame Nayland to be so straightforward, but he did not refuse. He nodded at Gavin, who immediately accepted the box. Inside the box was a Mavis Bank crystal card. Given the Nayland family's wealth, they would definitely not be cheap. Furthermore, Madame Nayland had promised to support the Great Yu Empire in unifying the Frostwave Weave. Gavin was excited as he finally had money. However, Lu Yin did not care too much about it, as he was more concerned about whether or not the Nayland family would support him. This was not something that the Great Yu Empire's military could compare to. Although the Great Yu Empire had unified the Frostwave Weave, how much military funding could they possibly have? He still had more than 3,000 star essence on him, which was equivalent to about 3 billion star crystals, which was more than enough to support the Great Yu Empire's military. However, he could not use the money he had earned to supplement the Great Yu Empire's military unless there was a crisis. He was someone who had seen the bigger picture and he had spent tens of thousands of star essence during this period of time. These were star essence, not star crystals. If converted to star crystals, it would be enough to support the Great Yu Empire's military for decades. It should be known that the Great Yu Empire's military was funded in cosmic dollars, not in star crystals. The difference between the two was simply too great. This was the outer verse, and if it were the inner verse, then any random power's military spending would be far more than this. The innerverse military food, weapons and cultivation resources were all incomparable to the outerverse. The Nayland family expressed their sincerity, and Lu Yin personally brought Madame Nayland to tour Xinyu Star. To be honest, even he himself had not visited much of the planet before. After sending the others away, Madame Nayland stretched lazily beside a cliff by the shore. Her exquisite curves caused Lu Yin to swallow his saliva. She was too alluring. "I'm so tired. I really want to sleep," she said in a languid voice as her eyes glazed over. Lu Yin licked his lips. "Your residence is not far from the palace. It used to be the residence of the vice-treasurer, but it's been renovated." She beamed at Lu Yin. "You're now the royal regent and are in charge of an entire nation. Student Lu, your temperament has changed a lot since the first time I saw you." "Is that so?" Lu Yin looked at her. "How have you changed?" She rolled her eyes and pursed her lips into a smile. "I don't know how to put it. You used to be a student but now you're a leader." Lu Yin shrugged. "It's just a fringe weave of the outerverse." She looked at him. "I don't know why, but I have a feeling that the current you is starting to take off." Lu Yin laughed. "You must be tired. Go and rest. Don't worry, I'll do my best to protect you here." She stared into Lu Yin's eyes and suddenly approached him. Her fragrance assaulted his nostrils and he subconsciously retreated. However, there was a cliff behind him and he had nowhere else to go. Madame Nayland moved closer until she was less than 10 centimeters away from him. If he moved a little closer, he would be able to kiss her. "Do you know, if you say something like that to a woman, she'll misunderstand." Madame Nayland's lips parted slightly as she spoke in a gentle voice. Lu Yin's heart raced. Madame Nayland's allure was too great, and at that moment he forgot about everything else. She was the only thing in his eyes. His breathing quickened and he subconsciously wanted to kiss her. However, Madame Nayland smiled and retreated just as he was about to kiss her. She then gave Lu Yin a beautiful smile and turned to leave. Lu Yin panted heavily as he watched the fairy leave. He felt even more tired than when he had fought against an enlighter. What kind of feeling was this? He couldn't control himself and had the urge to push her down. This feeling was too wonderful. "Your Highness, I'll be staying on Xinyu Star. Don't worry, I'll pay the rent, hee." Madame Nayland's voice gradually faded into the distance. Lu Yin took a deep breath and then exhaled. He smiled bitterly as he looked into the distance. At that moment, Lu Yin received a message from Gavin on his gadget. The bank card that Madame Nayland had given him contained 5 billion star crystals. Chapter 542. This was enough, but it was only enough to cover the Great Yu Empire's military expenses. He had to think of a way to obtain more money from the fairies and increase his power. Elsewhere, Xianxia was withdrawing money from a Mavis bank 1 filament away from Zhou Star with Gavin. The Mavis bank on Zhou Star had long since been taken away by many people. The two had just walked out when Xianxia's expression changed, and he grabbed Gavin and shot into the sky. The next moment, a man in front of them raised his head and charged towards the Mavis bank, blasting open the ground with a single palm. Gavin's face paled as he looked down in shock. This person, robbing a bank. He's a hunter, Xianxia said. Gavin's heart trembled when he heard that this person was a hunter. There were less than 10 people in the entire Frostwave Weave who were at this level, and there were only 2 or 3 who served the Empire. He had never expected to meet someone who would rob a bank. This person must have come from the Innerverse and had been left behind in the Outerverse. The moment the hunter attacked, the entire planet shook. A powerhouse with a power level of over 100,000 was not something an ordinary planet could withstand. The Great Yu Empire's army on the planet immediately moved, but they were stopped by Xianxia. This person was a hunter, and even he was not confident that he could deal with him. However, this hunter was too stupid, and he had actually dared to rob a Mavis bank. Mavis banks were spread throughout the Innerverse and Outerverse, and if they could be robbed so easily, they would have long since ceased to exist. Even though this was just a branch on an ordinary Outerverse planet, it was still not a place that could be casually robbed. The ground beneath the Mavis bank shattered, and the hunter shot up into the sky in less than half a minute. His eyes were filled with excitement, and it was obvious that he had gained something. However, the moment he emerged from the ground, the Mavis bank's large tree filled with universal coins moved. Its branches pierced through the void and wrapped around the hunter. The hunter bellowed and took out a long blade to slash at the branches, but it was useless. The branches did not break, and they continued to wrap around the hunter with increasing force. The hunter howled, "Spare me, I won't do it again, I won't do it again." Within the bank, the manager looked on coldly, his eyes filled with disdain and contempt. Countless people had tried to rob the Mavis bank over the years, but how many had succeeded? This person had assumed that the Innerverse and Outerverse were separated, and that the Mavis bank was nothing. However, the bank had already considered such a situation. There was a crack and the hunter was cut in half at the waist. Fresh blood splattered all over the ground and onto the universal currency, dyeing the ground red. Outside the bank, many people watched this scene with horrified expressions. When they looked at the Mavis bank again, their attitudes had completely changed. This bank had the ability to kill a hunter. Xianxia. 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 Xianxia's faces. Xianxia. Xianxia's face turned solemn. That tree was rather terrifying, but what was even more frightening was that it did not display any power level. Even though it had killed a hunter, there was still no power level indicator. This was strange, as this was the Mavis bank's hidden trump card. Even if they were isolated from the Outerverse, the Mavis bank still had the ability to protect itself. It. As expected of the powerful force in charge of the human economy. But now that the Outerverse was isolated, could the Mavis bank's reserves hold out? Zhou Star's Mavis bank's reserves of universal currency and star crystals had almost all been used up, and the other planets were not far behind. Lu Yin had Gavin talk to the Mavis bank's manager on Zhou Star to find out more about the bank. He then went to look for Hai Chichi, as it had been a while since he last saw her. The lively Hai Chichi was a headache to deal with, but the current Hai Chichi was heart-wrenching. Lu Yin looked at her curled-up body as she stared at the ocean. She had been like this all this time. Lu Yin walked behind Hai Chichi and said, "According to the information I received, the Outerverse isolated weave is weakening, which means that the astral river is also gradually weakening. One day, it will return to its original state." Hai Chichi's eyes lit up and she looked at Lu Yin expectantly. "Really?" Lu Yin nodded. "How long will that take? How long before I can return to the Sea King's dome?" Hai Chichi asked anxiously, looking at Lu Yin with both apprehension and anticipation. Lu Yin thought about it. "About 10 years. When she heard that, Hai Chichi seemed to have lost her soul and her face paled. Lu Yin sighed. 10 years is already pretty good. It's better than never being able to return. Hai Chichi nodded and sat down again. Got it. Thank you. Lu Yin patted her head and turned to leave, sighing to himself. He had lied to Hai Chichi. The outer-verse isolated weave was indeed weakening, but it was very, very slow. At this rate, it would be impossible for the astral river to return to its original state, let alone 10 years. 10 years was just to give Hai Chichi some hope so that she could accept reality. Hai Chichi missed her home, but Lu Yin missed others as well. Big Sis, Uncle Ruben, his classmates from Astral 10, and even people like Mu Rong Ling Ke Lu Xiaoqiu and Zhanlong Daynite would occasionally appear in his mind. After the battle on planet Pyrolite, they had all returned to the Innerverse, and it was likely that they would never meet again. Lu Yin sometimes sighed with emotion. In the past, the various powers of the universe had coiled around him like pythons, making it difficult for him to breathe. Now that he was completely free, he missed that feeling. He missed the battle of wits with Night King Yuanjing and the days when he competed with Lemeter geniuses. Unfortunately, those days would never come again unless the astral river was restored. By that time, everything would have changed. The most unfortunate thing was that he had not been able to find out who his enemy was. A single piece of paper with the surname Lu and 72 lives would be difficult to settle. To the east of Frostwave Weave was a weave called Grand Top Weave. Grand Top Weave had once been led by the Nine Stack sect, but 3 months ago when the dire barbarian clan had appeared in Grand Top Weave, the Nine Stack sect had been completely annihilated. Most of the sect's experts had been killed, and only a few had managed to escape. The Nine Stack sect had been built on a giant meteorite that was even larger than Xenu Star. The meteorite was not fixed in one place and it was controlled by the Nine Stack sect. It drifted all over Grand Top Weave, which was one of the reasons why the Nine Stack sect was able to control Grand Top Weave. Historically, the Nine Stack sect had coveted Frostwave Weave, and they had fought a war with the Great Yu Empire. However, they had been repelled and both sides had been enemies. There was no sunlight on the meteorite and there was no ecology. The Nine Stack sect had hollowed out the interior of the meteorite and built a habitat there. There were mountains, rivers, and cities on the meteorite's interior. Lei Long sat cross-legged in a gloomy secret room. As an enlighter, he did not interfere with the clan's internal affairs and had left everything to his subordinates. Ever since the Innerverse and Outerverse had been separated, he had only acted once, and that had been to eliminate the Nine Stack sect's strongest expert, who had been infinitely close to becoming an enlighter. Thousands of kilometers away from the Nine Stack sect's headquarters, a group of people had gathered. They were cultivators who had been lucky enough to escape, and there were 2 hunters among them. Tianming was one of them. Tianming, is what you said true? There's really someone who's willing to help our Nine Stack sect deal with Lei Long? A hunter asked as he stared at Tianming. Tianming answered, "This is a favor left behind by the sect's ancestors. Even if you don't believe me, you should believe in the ancestors." That's right. Tianming has inherited the sect's 9 stacks, and he's even selflessly imparted it to everyone. Everyone should be able to understand his sincerity. Another hunter spoke up. She was a woman with average looks and she looked at Tianming with an unusual gaze. The hunter's eyes flickered and he nodded. He then looked around at everyone. "Since that's the case, we'll wait for that enlighter to appear and deal with Lei Long." Tianming did not say anything else. He turned around and looked at the Nine Stack sect's headquarters with a complicated expression. After this day, the Nine Stack sect would no longer exist in the universe. At this moment, the female hunter walked over to Tianming's side and whispered, "As an elder of the sect, I don't usually get involved in matters between disciples, but I know about your situation." Tianming's body trembled and he looked at the woman in shock. The woman replied, "The girl you once liked is my niece." Tianming lowered his head and forcefully suppressed the shock in his heart. "If the sect had truly given its inheritance to you, then it wouldn't have sent you to the Great Yu Empire as a spy. It wouldn't have broken you up with my niece and made you hate the sect. You're not even a descendant of the sect." The woman's tone became stricter as she stared at Tianming. Tianming retorted, "I inherited the sect's 9 stacks. 9 stacks is just a method to circulate one's strength, and it's not the only inheritance. From what I know, the Great Yu Empire's royal regent can use 30 stacks. I believe that it won't be difficult to impart 9 stacks to you," the woman said softly. Tianming's eyes flickered, but he could not quibble. The woman glanced behind her and then approached Tianming. She whispered, "What's your goal?" Or let me rephrase my question. What is the Great Yu Empire's royal regent's goal? Tianming stared at her and slowly clenched his fists. He sneered. You want to attack me? Tianming's eyes trembled. He remembered that this woman looked young, but she was a hunter. He was only a Lemeter, and the difference between them was too great. What do you want? Tianming asked. The woman looked in the direction of the Nine-Stack sect. The Nine-Stack sect has already been destroyed, and I want to join the Great Yu Empire. Introduce me to Royal Regent Lu Yin. Tianming had already guessed her intentions, or else she would have exposed him long ago. This woman was ambitious. All right. The woman nodded in satisfaction. What are you waiting for? The Dire Barbarian clan, Tianming replied. The woman was shocked. You want to use the Dire Barbarian clan to eliminate us? Tianming nodded. This is an order from His Highness. The woman remained where she was, deep in thought. Although she had given up on the Nine-Stack sect, these people were still her fellow disciples. Chapter 543. Before the woman could think any further, a powerful wave swept across the distance, shocking everyone from the Nine-Stack sect. What's going on? Have we been discovered? There really are survivors of the Nine-Stack sect. How dare they come back? They're courting death. An ugly middle-aged man shouted from the sky. He opened his mouth, and his voice transformed into a whistling sound that swept across the land. Tianming was grabbed by the woman and quickly retreated. Another hunter from the Nine-Stack sect soared into the sky and fought the hunter from the Dire Barbarian clan. The remaining cultivators from the Nine-Stack sect were surrounded by the Dire Barbarian clan, and another great battle broke out. Kaze was among the Dire Barbarian clan members. After the battle on planet Pyrolite, Avery had returned to the Innerverse, but Kaze had remained behind. His innate gift was very useful. Kaze also noticed Tianming and the female hunter in the distance, and he found it strange that she had not made a move. Where's Lu Yin? When is he coming out? The female hunter asked. Tianming stared at the sky, watching the battle between the hunters. Only one hunter from the Dire Barbarian clan had come, and even though he was stronger than the male hunter from the Nine-Stack sect, he still could not take down the hunter. The hunter from the Nine-Stack sect had been suppressed the entire time, and when he saw that the woman was not making a move, he shouted, Lan Wu, what are you looking at? Lan Wu looked at Tianming anxiously. Suddenly, the meteorite trembled and an indescribable stifling pressure swept over them. This was the strength of an enlighter. Everyone stopped fighting when they sensed this power, and those from the Nine-Stack sect looked at the sky in shock. Lei Long had appeared at some point. The cultivators from the Nine-Stack sect felt their hearts sink. It was over. The male hunter looked at Tianming as he wanted to know why the enlighter that Tianming had mentioned had not yet arrived. When Tianming saw Lei Long appear, he relaxed. Lan Wu stared at Tianming. If Lu Yin did not appear, then they would all be dead. Lei Long looked down arrogantly. There really are people who don't know what's good for them. He then raised his hand. To him, killing these people was too easy. The first to bear the brunt of his attack was the male hunter, who was pierced through by Lei Long's voice. His corpse fell to the ground, and the shockwaves from the attack instantly killed more than 10 cultivators from the Nine-Stack sect. Suddenly, someone shouted from below, the Nine-Stack sect requests assistance from the Great Yu Empire. Lei Long looked in the direction of the voice, which had come from Tianming. After he finished speaking, the void in front of Lei Long tore open and two figures walked out. One of them was Northline Flowzone's enlighter, Granny Chan. The other was Lu Yin, who was wearing universal armor. When he saw Granny Chan and Lu Yin appear, Lei Long's expression darkened. The surviving members of the Nine-Stack sect heaved a sigh of relief, as an enlighter had truly appeared. Lan Wu was shocked. She had assumed that Lu Yin would be the only one who had appeared, and she had never expected that there would be another enlighter. It was no wonder why Lu Yin had been able to kill Karthika, as that enlighter must have contributed to his victory. Granny Chan, why have you come to Grand Topweave? Lei Long asked as he stared at Granny Chan. His gaze swept over Lu Yin and a trace of fear flashed through his eyes. Grand Topweave and Frostwave Weave bordered each other, and he had long since wanted to make a move against Frostwave Weave. However, ever since he had learned that Lu Yin had killed Karthika, he had not made a move. Karthika's power level surpassed his own, and even if Lu Yin was just a Lemiter, Lei Long did not dare to underestimate him. Granny Chan did not speak as she was only there to serve as a foil to intimidate Lei Long. Lu Yin was the one who truly made the decision. Lu Yin's eyes were filled with star energy as he stared at Lei Long. After a while he relaxed. This person's rune lines surpassed Karthika's own, but they were lower than Karthika's tamed beast. Senior Lei Long, may I know how the Nine-Stack sect has offended you to the point that you're so angry that you've annihilated the entire sect and caused rivers of blood to flow? Lu Yin asked. Lei Long's brows rose. Junior, it's not your place to interfere with my matters. Don't think that you can stand shoulder to shoulder with me just because you killed Karthika. Don't think that I don't know that you relied on an external object to kill Karthika. That should have been the Sea King's power, right? How many times can you use that power? Lu Yin raised his head. That's right. I don't have the qualifications to stand shoulder to shoulder with you. However, you're an inner-verse powerhouse and you've publicly annihilated an outer-verse power. I'm worried that your next target might be the Great Yu Empire. I've heard that you do have such a plan. Lei Long sneered. So what if I do? Scram, I don't have time to waste with you. He then looked at Granny Chan. My dire barbarian clan has never interacted with your Northline flow zone, so I hope that you won't provoke me. Even if the inner verse and outer verse are separated, it will be restored one day. When that time comes, will Northline flow zone be able to withstand my dire barbarian clan's fury? Granny Chan slowly replied, I'm here because I hope that Brother Lei will give me some face and not touch Frostwave Weave. Lei Long's eyes narrowed as he looked at Lu Yin. Kid, you've got quite the reputation. Lu Yin smiled. Senior Lei, I don't dare to interfere with your matters. Senior Granny Chan isn't provoking you for no reason, and I don't want to become your enemy. How about we make a deal? Lei Long's eyes flashed. What kind of deal? I have a relationship with the Nine-Stack sect and I can't just watch them be annihilated. I'm willing to use a power vessel in exchange for the safety of these people. Please allow me to take them away, Lu Yin said. Lei Long and Granny Chan looked at Lu Yin in shock. A power vessel was not something that an ordinary person could obtain. Every power vessel had its own independent power, just like Zaylin's dagger. If used properly, it could turn the tide of a battle. There were very few power vessels in the universe, and even enlighters like them were unable to obtain one. You have a power vessel? Lei Long was astonished. Lu Yin nodded. It's just a small toy that won't be of much use to you, senior. However, you can give it to a junior as it can be considered a life-saving item. Lei Long stared at Lu Yin as this made sense. If a power vessel was useful to Lu Yin, then Lei Long did not believe that Lu Yin would be willing to exchange it for the trash below. However, even if it was useless to Lei Long, he could still study it. He did not doubt that Lu Yin had a power vessel. This person even had a supreme treasure like Fates, and so it would not be strange for him to have a power vessel as well. Alright, I'll make the decision to spare their lives, Lei Long said. Lu Yin pointed at the Nine-Stack sect's headquarters. Senior, I don't just want to exchange for their lives. I also hope that Senior will return the Nine-Stack sect's headquarters. That's why I'm here. Lei Long's gaze turned cold. Kid, don't push your luck. I'm already being generous by sparing their lives. I won't touch your Frostwave Weave either, but don't test my patience again. Granny Chan looked at Lu Yin. Quit while you're ahead. Don't worry, he won't touch Frostwave Weave again. Lu Yin was helpless. Alright, thank you, Senior. He then took out a box from his cosmic ring and tossed it to Lei Long. After all that had been said, even though Lei Long still had his guard up, he had relaxed quite a bit. Furthermore, he did not believe that Lu Yin could kill him with an unmanned weapon, and the box did not give off any dangerous aura. Every enlighter had their own judgment of danger, so he opened the box and saw progenitor Wuxiang's hide. Then his mind buzzed and he fainted. Lu Yin's eyes flashed. This was the moment. He pulled out his gun and aimed at Lei Long. Bang. The void trembled, and in the next moment, blood spurted out from Lei Long's heart. Half of his body was pulverized and the intense pain woke him up. However, it was quickly followed by powerlessness as half of his body was gone, and fresh blood dripped onto the ground. He stared at the mangled flesh around his heart in disbelief, and the box fell from his hand. This unforeseen event shocked everyone, including Granny Chan. No one had expected Lu Yin to directly attack and severely injure Lei Long. Lei Long's eyes were filled with resentment as he glared at Lu Yin. He growled and charged forward. Despicable. He would definitely die, but even if he died he would drag this person down with him. Lu Yin retreated a few steps, allowing Granny Chan to pass. She was still in shock, and when she saw Lei Long's attack she subconsciously blocked it and easily extinguished Lei Long's last trace of life. Lei Long's corpse crashed to the ground, shocking everyone. Lu Yin landed and put away the box. He then took out Lei Long's cosmic ring and some of his blood. He would open it when he returned. He then looked up at Granny Chan and bowed. Thank you for your help, Senior. Everyone was silent, and the members of the dire barbarian clan looked at Lu Yin in fear. This person had killed their enlighter. The people from the Nine Stack sect were similarly shocked. Were enlighters that easy to kill? Lan Wu gulped, and she looked at Lu Yin with unprecedented fear. He was the only person in the Outerverse who had killed an enlighter while chatting. Granny Chan stood high up in the sky and stared at Lu Yin. This person made her heart turn cold. She slowly descended and faced Lu Yin. You never planned on letting Lei Long off from the start, did you? Lu Yin sighed. Senior, how can I allow others to sleep on my bed? You know the dire barbarian clan's nature. If I didn't kill Lei Long he would have killed me sooner or later. I just made the first move to gain the upper hand. Granny Chan looked at Lu Yin with a complicated expression and did not speak for a long time. Even in the Innerverse, enlighters were not easily killed, but this person had already killed two. Granny Chan had never even killed an enlighter in her entire life. In comparison, this person was too terrifying. Granny Chan looked at Lu Yin and suddenly had a premonition that the Innerverse and Outerverse had been separated, and a monster had been released. Lu Yin looked past Granny Chan to Tianming, and then at Lan Wu who was beside Tianming. He understood and waved his hand. Destroy the dire barbarian clan. When Lan Wu heard Lu Yin's command she did not hesitate and immediately attacked the dire barbarian clan members. The other cultivators from the Nine Stack sect also attacked at the same time. The situation had reversed. The hunter from the dire barbarian clan saw that the situation had taken a turn for the worse and immediately fled. Senior, please help me keep that person here, Lu Yin said respectfully to Granny Chan. Granny Chan did not refuse, and she did not know why she did not refuse. Her heart was filled with boundless fear of Lu Yin, and this fear turned into motivation to help Lu Yin. She subconsciously did not want to become enemies with this young man. The hunter from the dire barbarian clan had also died. All of the dire barbarian clan members had died, and only one person had been left behind by Lu Yin, K's. Chapter 544. Not long after Granny Chan left, she needed to properly consider her relationship with this young man. Lu Yin did not care. He had killed Lei Long, and with the Nalan family's help he should be able to obtain enough money to upgrade the gun to a level that could threaten powerhouses with a power level of 300,000. With this kind of strength, even if Granny Chan ignored him it would not matter. Besides, she probably would not ignore him as enlighters were all very smart. There weren't many members of the dire barbarian clan on the meteorite continent, and most of them were former members of the Nine Stack sect who had surrendered to the dire barbarian clan. This group of people should be punished, but Lu Yin spared them. Compared to the cultivators who were loyal to the Nine Stack sect, these fence-sitters were more beneficial to him. He wasn't actually trying to rebuild the Nine Stack sect. It was just a name. The Nine Stack sect should disappear at this moment. Tianming, Lan Wu and Kei stood in front of Lu Yin. Lu Yin said to Tianming, "From today onwards, you are the sect master of the Nine Stack sect." Tianming was shocked. "Your Highness, I want to return to the Great Yu Empire." Lu Yin smiled. "Stay in Grand Topweave for now. Once Grand Topweave has stabilized I'll let you return." Tianming nodded. Lu Yin looked at Lan Wu. "Why are you willing to join me?" She respectfully replied, "I want a way out." Lu Yin nodded and praised her. "You're smart. Stay here and help Tianming stabilize the Nine Stack sect. In the future I'll rebuild the 13 Imperial squadrons and you'll have a chance to become a captain." Lan Wu was delighted. "Thank you, Your Highness." Lu Yin knew that she was faking it. Compared to being a captain of the 13 Imperial squadrons, it was much better to live a carefree life in Grand Topweave as a border official. However, he did not have anyone available for the time being, so this was the only thing he could do. However, things would change soon and she would be transferred to the Great Yu Empire. He had Tianming and Lan Wu leave and reorganize the Nine Stacks sect before looking at K's. K's lowered his head. The dire barbarian clan had been completely wiped out and he was the only survivor. It was all thanks to this person in front of him who had even killed an almighty enlighter. Case did not have any thoughts of revenge as that was unrealistic. He just wanted to survive. I heard that your innate gift is very special, Lu Yin asked curiously. Case hurriedly replied, yes, my innate gift allows me to determine a person's strength through their voice. Lu Yin was surprised. You heard about my strength back then? Case nodded. He felt that this person was useful but he didn't know how to use him. He also didn't know how to get this person to willingly help him, which made him feel very conflicted. After all, the dire barbarian clan members were known to be despicable, which was a problem. Seventh bro, there's a method in the Immerse Beast Tamer's flow zone that prevents your enemies from betraying you. That method is to brand your enemy's tamed beast. As long as you can guarantee that your tamed beast is loyal to you, then it can be used as a tool to monitor that person, the monkey suddenly said. There are also some technologically advanced countries that place things on their enemies to ensure their loyalty. I've met such people on the border battlefield. It's very sad but it's very useful. Lu Yin fell into deep thought. Case waited nervously and not long after, Lu Yin decided to temporarily let Case join the 1st Imperial Squadron. He wanted to turn the 1st Squadron into his personal guards. Lei Long's death shook the surrounding weaves. After the innerverse and outerverse had been separated, Lei Long was the second enlighter to die. The first, Karthika, had also died at Lu Yin's hands. This fact caused the remaining enlighters in the outerverse to tremble in fear. They had no choice but to admit that Lu Yin had the ability to instantly kill enlighters. Because of this, Lu Yin had gained a nickname, Enlighter's Bane. When Lu Yin found out about this nickname he was speechless. Now that he had a nickname like this, it would be impossible for him to scheme against enlighters in the future. Perhaps those people would not even dare to touch the things that he had given out. Fortunately, no one knew the true method that he had used to kill Karthika and Lei Long. Even Granny Chan, who had witnessed the entire process, did not know the reason behind it. She only knew about the gun and not progenitor Wuxiang's hide, so she did not ask. After returning to Xinyu Star, Lu Yin went straight to King Zishan's palace and used Lei Long's blood to open Lei Long's cosmic ring. These enlighters were afraid that they would not be able to obtain enough resources and would enter a period of exhaustion, so they would store all of the resources they had obtained in their own cosmic rings. Lei Long's cosmic ring had about 20,000 star essence, which was 10,000 less than Karthika's, and there were also hundreds of thousands of star crystals. Lu Yin was disappointed as Lei Long's was 10,000 star essence less than Karthika's. Unfortunately, it seemed like the dire barbarian clan was not as wealthy as the second grade hall, and Lei Long had not obtained many star essence from the Nine Stacks sect. That shouldn't be the case as the Nine Stacks sect shouldn't be so poor. Lu Yin immediately contacted Tianming and asked about the Nine Stacks sect's resources. Lan Wu told him that most of the Nine Stacks sect's resources were used to maintain the sect's operations, and the sect's treasury did not have many star essence. However, there were tens of billions of star crystals. Those star crystals were still in the Nine Stacks sect's headquarters. Lu Yin was speechless as he had forgotten to use his domain to check the situation. Lei Long's cosmic ring could not hold that many star crystals. Tens of billions of star crystals were equivalent to tens of thousands of star essence, which was a terrifying amount. However, it was not convenient to use as the screen that appeared on his die's 3 pips was not very large. It was more suitable to store star essence, but if he used star crystals his hands would probably become sore and he would not be able to upgrade it even once. Star crystals could not be used, but he could not allow the Nine Stacks sect to benefit from them. Lu Yin immediately ordered Lan Wu to escort these star crystals to Xinyu Star so that they could be added to the Great Yu Empire's treasury. As for Grand Topweave, it would slowly recover. Aside from money, there were many other things in Lei Long's cosmic ring. Just like Karthika, there were also many healing medicines. Lu Yin suddenly discovered something good that had been stored in the ring, and it had been preserved by spiritual threads. This material was most suitable for storing one type of item, A source box. He had not expected Lei Long to have a source box. Lu Yin looked at the box that was several meters wide and thought for a moment. He then put on his universal armor and slowly opened the box. Suddenly, an invisible force swept past the armor and pierced through King Zishan's palace, shooting into the void. Many people below the palace saw a giant crack extend into space before slowly dissipating. Lu Yin immediately closed the box and his eyes widened in shock. He raised a hand to touch the area where the source box had touched his universal armor, and he could clearly see a white mark. The source box's formless killing intent had actually been able to damage this universal armor, which was something that could withstand an Enlighter's attack. Lu Yin hurriedly put the box away. Outside the palace, Bronson rushed in, but Lu Yin stopped him. He touched the box and found that the invisible killing intent had damaged the universal armor. This source box was probably a boundless advanced source box, and it might even contain the power of a predecessor. This sort of source box was not something that he could come into contact with. Lu Yin put the box away and then looked through the other items. Frostwave Weave was located near the edge of the Outerverse Astral Wilderness. It was bordered to the south by Dark Mist Weave, to the north by North Castle Weave, to the east by Grand Top Weave and to the west by Lars Weave. The moment news of Lei Long's death spread, the Blaze Realms organizations that had been in Lars Weave immediately left. The second grade hall that had occupied North Castle Weave also retreated north. All of the Enlighters in the weaves that bordered Frostwave Weave felt their hearts tremble. This was especially true for Hua Howie, as he felt that Lu Yin would cause trouble for him. Faced with Lu Yin's thunderous killing intent, Hua Howie did not dare to meet Lu Yin until he had a clear understanding of Lu Yin's methods. Enlighters could not be blamed for being so cowardly, as anyone who could become an Enlighter was a genius. These people had many ways to preserve their lives and it was not easy for them to die. It was very rare for someone to die in a battle, but Lu Yin had killed 2 of them in one go, which made many Enlighters feel uneasy. Even Enlighters from large organizations like Night Queen Chuyu Viletree and Wen Kitchen were shocked, and they did not dare to rashly make contact with Frostwave Weave. The 9-stack sect had been handed over to Tianming, which was equivalent to Frostwave Weave merging with Grand Top Weave. Their territory had instantly doubled, and although they had not completely occupied the weave, it was only a matter of time. At present, the lack of talent was becoming more and more serious. There was a severe lack of troops and experts which gave Lu Yin a headache. He had already handed over many memorials from the cabinet to Huan Sha of the Lu Ministry of Staff, but even with Huan Sha's innate gift, she was too busy to handle them all. Many of the memorials were still transferred to King Zishan's palace. Lu Yin also wanted to transfer the memorials to Wendy Yushan's residence, but the residence was not open at all. Even the courtiers could not enter, which made him very helpless. After half a month passed like this, Lu Yin finally could not take it anymore. He was not cut out for government affairs and coincidentally, Madame Naylan requested an audience. Lu Yin's eyes lit up. That's right, Madame Naylan. How could he have forgotten about her? The Naylan family was one of the wealthiest corporations in the Outerverse, and their businesses spanned all 72 weaves. In terms of influence, they were much stronger than the Great Yu Empire, and the matters that they had to deal with were far more complicated than those in the Great Yu Empire. Madame Naylan would definitely be able to handle such matters. She was quickly brought into King Zishan's palace. The moment he saw her, Lu Yin's breath caught in his throat and he was stunned once again. This woman always gave him a sense of novelty. She was naturally charming and she exuded a seductive aura from the inside out. When paired with her white tight-fitting dress that revealed her smooth white calves and her feet that were painted with red nail polish, she was simply too beautiful. Lu Yin knew that he had a certain level of resistance to women's charms. After all, there were so many beauties around him, including his beloved Ming Yan, Bai Shui, Starsabil, Wendy Yushan and so on. All of them were absolute beauties, but his resistance to Madame Naylan continued to decrease. She was too seductive and most importantly she was not doing it on purpose. Lu Yin could not imagine whether he would be able to control himself if she was trying to seduce him on purpose. Madame Naylan looked at Lu Yin and her eyes curved into crescents. Your Highness, you're making me feel uneasy with you staring at me like that. Lu Yin hurriedly retracted his gaze and apologized. My apologies, madam. I was distracted. Madame Naylan smiled. She had seen too many gazes that were infatuated with her beauty, so she did not find it strange. No matter how talented or invincible this person was, he was still a man, and a hot-blooded one at that. Your Highness, what are you worried about? You can tell us, and the Nalan family will definitely help if we can. Chapter 545. Lu Yin was delighted when he heard her words. Actually, I was just about to look for Madame and ask for your advice. I wouldn't dare, but I'm all ears. Madame Nalan and Lu Yin both sat down elegantly and smiled at him. Lu Yin coughed and organized his thoughts. The Great Yu Empire has already taken over Frostwave Weave, but there's a lack of manpower and no one to manage it. Does Madame have any ideas on how to alleviate the situation? Madame Nalan's eyes lit up. Just Frostwave Weave shouldn't be a problem for your Highness. Lu Yin smiled. That includes Grand Top Weave. She was shocked. Has your Highness already completely taken over Grand Top Weave? Although Lu Yin had killed Lei Long, that did not mean that he had taken over Grand Top Weave. Even if he had conquered the Nine-Stack sect, that did not mean that he had conquered Grand Top Weave. It could only be said that he had met the requirements to do so, but it was not something that could be done in a day or two. After all, a weave was too vast. The reason that Frostwave Weave had been unified so quickly was mainly due to Undying Yushan's many years of planning. Furthermore, the Great Yu Empire was still a local power in Frostwave Weave, so there would not be much resistance. Now it was too difficult to cross weaves and conquer. Even if Grand Top Weave did not have any experts who could resist the Great Yu Empire, the stubborn factions might not be able to conquer it in a year or two. Not really, but Grand Top Weave cannot escape. The current successor of the Nine-Stack sect is one of my people. Lu Yin did not try to hide anything. The Nalan family dominated the Outerverse, and to put it bluntly, if not for the changes in the universe, the Nalan family would not have asked for help from the Great Yu Empire. After all, the Nalan family could afford to raise an enlighter. Madame Nalan understood and looked at Lu Yin with admiration. So your Highness already has plans. I'm impressed. Your current predicament makes sense. Now that you've suddenly gained a new weave, whether it's management or conquest, you'll need talents. She paused for a moment before continuing. Although the universe is vast, there's only one way to manage it. Has your Highness heard of the spider web theory? Lu Yin was puzzled. The spider web theory. That's right. The so-called spider web theory refers to arranging the management of an organization according to a spider's web, which ultimately converges at the center. The spider's web is innumerable and seems complicated, but it's actually quite simple. Not a single point can escape, and it can be used to capture prey. To a spider, no matter how large its web is, it's still a part of its body. The Great Yu Empire is the same, your Highness. In King Zishan's palace, Lu Yin and Madame Nalan chatted for a full 3 hours. They only stopped when Madame Nalan's mouth was dry. She licked her red lips and smiled at him. Have you thought it through, your Highness? Lu Yin nodded and thanked her gratefully. Thank you, Madame. I didn't have a clue before, but after hearing your words, my mind is much clearer. Madame Nalan smiled. Actually, these are just theories. Governing a country is different from governing a business. If your Highness wants to learn how to govern a country, you should read more books and ask the professionals. These are just my experiences and they aren't very helpful. Lu Yin solemnly replied, You're wrong, Madame. For the current Great Yu Empire, there's no need for any strategy to govern a country. A single word is enough, because in this universe the strong are respected. If I don't have the strength to kill an enlighter, then there will be countless people in the Great Yu Empire who won't respect me. Madame Nalan smiled. Perhaps, but blindly relying on power isn't a long-term solution. Lu Yin agreed with this point. Governing a country during war was different from governing a country during peacetime, and he didn't understand these things at all. Now that they were at war, he could use his ideas without any qualms. This was because they were united during war, but once the war ended, many problems would arise and they couldn't be solved through strength alone. The most obvious problem was how to restore the economy, determine military expenditures, education, transportation, research, and so on. Many problems would arise, and he needed to find someone to manage the country before the war ended. Otherwise, the war wouldn't end. His conversation with Madame Nalan had given Lu Yin a rudimentary idea of how to manage a country. He didn't know if it was suitable, but he had to give it a try. Undying Yushan's political legacy was about to be destroyed. Madame Nalan's mouth was dry from all the talking and she took a sip of tea. Lu Yin suddenly remembered that Madame Nalan had taken the initiative to look for him, so she definitely had something to discuss. He hurriedly said, "Madam, you've been talking about me for a while now. What do you want from me today?" Madame Nalan put down her teacup. "It's nothing important. I just want to recommend someone to your highness who might be able to help you." Lu Yin's eyes lit up. "Who is it?" "Your highness should have met erudite Flow Zone's warfront commander Shui Chuanxiao." Madame Nalan looked at Lu Yin as if trying to discern something from his eyes. Lu Yin was shocked. "Shui Chuanxiao? Of course I've met him. He's the most intelligent warfront commander in human history, and he was the one who confirmed my contributions. However, it's rumored that he committed a crime of betrayal and was imprisoned in Earth's swamp for 10,000 years. Does your highness believe that Shui Chuanxiao betrayed humanity?" Madame Nalan stared into Lu Yin's eyes. Lu Yin thought about it. "It's hard to say. It's not my place to speak on such matters." Madame Nalan's eyes flashed. "Then does your highness dislike Shui Chuanxiao?" Lu Yin shook his head. "Of course not. Commander Shui is very charismatic and he was the one who agreed with my conjecture about the Xianxia. He was also the one who made me a war drummer. To be honest, Commander Shui is very magnanimous." Madame Nalan nodded. "Yes, he's very magnanimous. However, such a person was accused of betraying his own race. Sometimes conspiracies can be very scary." Lu Yin looked at her strangely. "Madam, the person you wanted to recommend couldn't be Commander Shui, right?" Madame Nalan smiled. "Of course not. Commander Shui is imprisoned in Earth's swamp, which is the most despairing prison for humans. No one can save him. You've met the person I recommended. Her name is Enya and she's outside King Zishan's palace." Lu Yin hurriedly had Bronson bring her in. Not long after, Lu Yin saw Enya and he was shocked to see her. When Lu Yin had been recognized for his contributions and received honor points, Enya had brought him to planet Songyuan and introduced him to the situation there. Lu Yin had a deep impression of this beautiful blonde adjutant, as there weren't many women in the military. Enya immediately bowed when she saw Lu Yin, and her expression was solemn. "Enya greets your highness." Lu Yin hurriedly excused her and asked curiously, "I remember that you're Commander Shui's adjutant. Why aren't you at the erudite Flow Zone's border?" Enya indifferently replied, "The human domain and the astral beast domain have reached an agreement, and the war has stopped. Commander Shui has been captured and the rest of us have either been banished or dismissed. I'm one of the luckier ones as I was sent to the Outerverse. Enya accidentally saved me, which is why I recommended her to your highness. She's lived in the military since she was young, and now that she's been separated from the military, she has nowhere else to go." Lu Yin nodded and sized up Enya. She was an explorer, and since she was able to follow Shui Chuanxiao, she had to be very capable as well. "I'm planning to establish the Lu Ministry of Defense to help me with military affairs. Are you willing to join?" Enya immediately agreed. She immediately expressed her gratitude. Even though the Lu Ministry of Defense had yet to be established since it served Lu Yin and was named Lu, it meant that this department would only serve Lu Yin, and it would definitely have power in the future. "Madam, I should be the one thanking you. The Great Yu Empire lacks talents and you've sent me one." Lu Yin smiled. Madame Nalan exchanged a few more pleasantries with Lu Yin before leaving. Enya was arranged to stay in King Zishan's palace, and once the Lu Ministry of Defense was established, she would begin handling military affairs. Regardless of whether it was the Lu Ministry of Staff or the Lu Ministry of Defense, Lu Yin planned to set them up near King Zishan's palace so that it would be easier for him to monitor them. He did not believe in the saying, "Don't use people you suspect, but don't use people you trust." He did not believe that he had the charisma to make people submit with a single glance. He needed to observe them for a period of time before he could determine whether or not they were trustworthy. If they were not, then he would not use them no matter how strong they were. His conversation with Madame Nalan had benefited Lu Yin greatly. 10 days later, during a court meeting, he directly announced a reform of the Great Yu Empire's power structure. He would formally establish the Lu Ministry of Staff and the Lu Ministry of Defense based on the current official system, and they would help him handle government and military affairs. Under these two departments would be the Lu Pavilion of Staff and the Lu Ministry of Defense. 10 filaments and 1 pavilion. This was Lu Yin's initial plan. Every 10 filaments would have a Lu Pavilion of Staff that would handle the 10 filaments' government affairs. Important matters would be handled by the Lu Pavilion of Staff and the Imperial Cabinet, and in the end, only the most important matters would be handled by the Lu Ministry of Staff and the Imperial Cabinet. The Lu Ministry of Defense was the same, with 1 pavilion per 10 filaments that handled military affairs. This was the spider web theory. Every Lu Pavilion of Staff and the Lu Ministry of Defense was a point of the spider web that was spread out layer by layer. There might be corruption or collusion between officials and bandits, but these were unavoidable. This method could at least temporarily ensure the stability of the empire and was beneficial in nurturing talents. During the court meeting, when Lu Yin announced the reform, he was immediately met with resistance from the imperial cabinet. Although the Lu Ministry of Staff had already been established, it could only be considered Lu Yin's personal department, and it didn't even have the qualifications to participate in court meetings. But now that it was officially established, not only would the imperial cabinet's power be dispersed, but even the imperial cabinet's authority would be completely suppressed. This was something that the ministers of the imperial cabinet could not accept. The Great Yu Empire had already unified Frostwave Weave and was about to merge with Grand Top Weave. This was the time for the imperial cabinet's authority to expand, but Lu Yin was actually trying to disperse their authority. No one could accept this. However, this intense resistance was met with Lu Yin's merciless dismissal. He had not forgotten the faces of these ministers when Karthika had been on Xenu Star, especially the 2 ministers from the imperial cabinet who had caused him to lose face. Back when undying Yushan had been on the throne, the Great Yu Empire had its own system of governance. Furthermore, it wasn't during a time of war, so it wasn't that easy to dismiss a minister. At the very least, one would need to have a suitable reason and evidence. But now Lu Yin was in charge and there was no need to explain himself. This caused the other ministers to tremble in fear, and even the usually stubborn Garop didn't say anything. Garop was very smart, and although he dared to speak out, he knew when to speak and when not to. Rebuking Lu Yin at this time was equivalent to going against him, and Garop would never do such a thing. Chapter 546. There were a total of 5 ministers in the imperial cabinet, and 2 of them had been dismissed during the court session. The others did not dare to say a word. This was exactly what Lu Yin wanted. He could accept advice, but that depended on the timing. If anyone dared to oppose him after he had made up his mind, then it would no longer be an advice, but rather an attempt to force him to abdicate. Compared to an enlighter, these ministers were like ants, and Lu Yin did not care about their resistance. At present, the 13 imperial squadrons only had 8 captains left, including Wendy Yushan. 5 of the other squadrons were missing captains, and Lu Yin himself was the captain of the first squadron. There were still 4 squadrons without captains, and he issued an order to recruit captains. Garop greets your highness. After the court session, Lu Yin met with Garop in the back garden of the palace, where undying Yushan had often summoned him. No need for formalities, please take a seat. Lu Yin looked at Garop warmly. This old man had not openly opposed Lu Yin during the court session, which meant that he was not stupid and could be used. Furthermore, he had not been too afraid of Karthika back then. Garop did not sit but instead bowed and respectfully said, Your Highness, please reconsider. Lu Yin took a sip of tea. Are you talking about the restructuring of power? Yes. Facts have proven that any change in power will shake the empire and bring about unpredictable consequences, Pilo said in a deep voice. Lu Yin looked at Garop. I'm not a politician and I don't want to be one. The restructuring of power might be good or bad, but I don't care. I only care about one thing, whether or not my words are useful. Garop's body trembled and he looked at Lu Yin. Your Highness, your words represent the Emperor, so of course they are useful. Your Highness, please consider the consequences of restructuring power. Then tell me, what are the disadvantages of establishing these 4 departments? Lu Yin asked. Garop solemnly replied, It's easy to create powerful departments. These departments were all established by your Highness, and the people inside hold great power. If they have any selfish motives, there will be very serious consequences. Lu Yin knew what Garop meant. Many emperors had departments that were loyal to them, and these departments were the emperor's eyes and ears. Of course, they could also be the source of the empire's collapse. Lu Yin looked at Garop. Lord Garop, you must have misunderstood. I have no intention of abolishing the imperial cabinet. The Lu Ministry of Staff, the Lu Ministry of Defense and the imperial cabinet are all part of the empire's upper echelons, and they restrict each other. Garop. Garop's heart skipped a beat and his face paled. He hurriedly bowed. Your Highness, please understand. This old subject has absolutely no intention of using his position for personal gain. Garop was about to speak when he suddenly thought of something. I don't have anyone to recommend. I'll have to trouble your Highness to consider. Lu Yin glanced at him and nodded. I understand. You may leave now. I'll take my leave. Garop left. Lu Yin sat in the back garden and tapped a single finger on the table, deep in thought. Establishing the 4 departments wasn't just to help him deal with government and military matters. There was another use that he wouldn't tell anyone about, and that was the benefits. Adding 4 new departments naturally meant that there would be more seats. These seats weren't prepared for the people of the Great Yu Empire, but rather for the people of the other weaves that he might occupy in the future. For example, Grand Top Weave. Once Grand Top Weave was completely occupied, the Great Yu Empire's authority would need someone from that weave, or there would be regional discrimination. Grand Top Weave wouldn't agree to an authority that didn't have someone from their own side. A large weave could create 10 Lu Ministry of Defense and Lu Ministry of Defense, which would consume a large number of seats. Lu Yin also needed to reserve 1 or 2 seats in the Lu Ministry of Staff and Lu Ministry of Defense for Grand Top Weave. This was a form of exchange. Exchanging authority for a weave's recognition of the Great Yu Empire was far more effective than military suppression. Garop had thought this through, which was why he hadn't recommended anyone to join the cabinet. Recommending someone to join the cabinet would not only reflect his own selfishness, but it would also cause the cabinet to lack seats. However, Lu Yin felt that Garop was overthinking things. At present, he had no plans to allow anyone from the other weaves to join the cabinet. At the very least, he would have to wait until Grand Top Weave was occupied by the military before he could use his authority to rope them in. There was a purple plant in the back garden that had the attack power of an explorer. It was very peculiar as it would completely restrain itself when facing powerhouses. Undying Yushan had once told Lu Yin that this plant was the only one that had survived on that planet, and it had been brought here. Because of this characteristic, the plant would change its attack power according to the environment it was in. Back then, Lu Yin had touched the plant under Undying Yushan's watchful eyes. Now there was no one around. Lu Yin raised his hand and touched the plant again. It was still very soft and comfortable, and the plant didn't seem to have any desire to attack. It could sense Lu Yin's strength and it would bend down in the face of a powerhouse. If even plants were like this, then there was no need to talk about humans. Lu Yin had been threatened and suppressed too many times, and he had even been treated as white meat. Now that the inner verse and outer verse had been separated, it was a godsend opportunity. He would not allow himself to repeat those mistakes. He wanted to become someone at the top and only he could threaten others. At this moment Bronson arrived and bowed respectfully. Your Highness, as you expected, that person went to the princess residence, but Princess Wendy Yushan did not meet him. Lu Yin nodded. Pass down the order, dismiss him immediately. Yes, Bronson left. Lu Yin had already expected that the 3rd cabinet official to be dismissed would appear. Someone would definitely ask Wendy Yushan to stop him, and as expected, these people were bold enough to stop the change in power. However, it didn't matter. Regardless of whether or not Wendy Yushan would stop him, even if she did, would she be able to stop him? The Great Yu Empire was no longer the Great Yu Empire of the past. Now that things had developed to this point, Wendy Yushan was only a princess in name, and she no longer had the ability to interfere with the Empire's power. Why didn't these people understand? Even someone like Wendy Yushan, who did not understand politics, understood this. His gadget beeped and Lu Yin glanced at it and sighed. It was Hai Chi-Chi. That brat had not given up and had personally gone to the Astral River to find a way to return to the Innerverse. Lu Yin was not worried about her safety, as he had filled his eyes with star energy to observe her. The number of rune lines on her body was terrifying, and she was definitely no less than a hunter's. This brat had a trump card, so he would let her search for it. It was better than curling up on the beach. Following the dismissal of the 3 cabinet officials, rumors began to spread on Xenu Star that the Great Yu Empire was about to change its name to the Great Yin Empire, that the royal regent was about to ascend to the throne, and that Princess Wendy Yushan was under house arrest. Countless rumors began to spread, and not just on Xenu Star but throughout the Great Yu Empire as well. The rumors caused a lot of discussion and many people believed them to be true. This made many of the Yushan family's loyalists unhappy, and over the next few days, nearly 100 people sought out Wendy Yushan to verify the authenticity of the rumors. Wendy Yushan appeared, but she only met with those people for a short while before leaving. The rumors of Wendy Yushan being under house arrest were quickly dispelled, but there were also rumors that the royal regent had threatened Princess Wendy Yushan, which led to another group of people visiting her residence. Lu Yin knew everything that had happened, and he had ordered the 13 imperial squadrons to find the source of the rumors. He had even massacred a group of people to prevent the rumors from spreading. However, this only treated the symptoms and not the root of the problem. As his authority grew, these rumors would definitely resurface, and at that time the Yushan bloodline would definitely clash with those who supported him. There were also people from the Zishan bloodline involved, and these people would naturally support Lu Yin, so the conflict would only grow. Lu Yin could not wait to fill up the 4 ministries, but it was not that easy, and it was not easy to find talented people. There were only 2 people left in the cabinet and it could not operate normally. Lu Yin made an exception and promoted Gavin to the cabinet. This finance minister was not as scheming as Sicker, nor was he as useless as Bailey. He was barely qualified to join the cabinet. The cabinet of 3 could now operate normally. Lu Yin also invited Xianxia Anna to join the Lu Ministry of Defense. With him around, the Anna family's influence would increase. Now that the Great Yu Empire was at war with foreign powers, not only did they have to maintain the stability of Frostwave Weave, but they also had to suppress Grand Top Weave. The Lu Ministry of Defense desperately needed talented people to join them. Xianxia Anna and Enya were still not enough. Lu Yin's control over the Great Yu Empire's military was still insufficient, and he was not even familiar with the commanders of Grand Top Weave's military. If not for his battle record of killing Enlighters, he even suspected that those commanders would have declared themselves kings outside of the Great Yu Empire. With a lack of talent and insufficient control over the military, Lu Yin had no choice but to send the 8th, 9th and 13th squadrons to Grand Top Weave to monitor the military, but they were not allowed to interfere with military deployment. As for Frostwave Weave, he sent the 6th and 11th squadrons to monitor the military. 5 of the 13 squadrons were transferred away, leaving behind only the 2nd, 3rd and 12th squadrons as well as his own 1st squadron. The 13 squadrons were directly under the Emperor's jurisdiction, and with them around, Lu Yin was temporarily at ease. He could spend his time slowly filling in the 4 ministries. Undying Yushan had not only left behind the 13 squadrons, but also a secret guard that had secretly protected him. Unfortunately, all of the guards had died at the hands of the Neo-Human Alliance. When he thought of the Neo-Human Alliance, Lu Yin thought of Sigmund Mathers. Back then, Sigmund Mathers had defected from Gunma Space Station and colluded with the Neo-Human Alliance. Sigmund Mathers had been wrongly imprisoned, which was a great crime against humanity. Even Undying Yushan had not been able to save him. If not for Lu Yin giving Sigmund Mathers credit for finding the Corpse King, he would have died long ago. Now that the Innerverse and Outerverse had been separated, no one could check if Sigmund Mathers had been imprisoned. Lu Yin directly released him and had him join Grand Top Weave's Lu Ministry of Defense to monitor Grand Top Weave. Chapter 547. The Great Yu Empire's recruitment of experts had never stopped. Ever since Lu Yin had killed Karthika, many experts had joined the Great Yu Empire. So far, 7 cruisers and more than 20 explorers had joined the Great Yu Empire. Almost all of these people came from organizations that had been wiped out in the surrounding weaves, and they hoped to borrow the Great Yu Empire's strength to protect themselves. Because of their special identities, Lu Yin did not arrange for them to join the 13 Imperial squadrons. The 13 Imperial squadrons had too much authority, so it was not suitable for them to join. Ever since the universe had changed, Lu Yin had not rested much. The 4 ministries had been established and Huansha was helping out with government affairs while Enya was helping out with military matters. Lu Yin finally had some time to rest. Under the cover of night, Lu Yin walked out of King Zishan's palace. He suddenly recalled the small outdoor tavern where he had drunk with the second prince. When he returned to the tavern, he noticed that the surroundings had changed. The ground had clearly been repaired, and the several crises that Xinyu Star had faced could be seen here. "Boss, a flask of wine," Lu Yin said as he sat down. The wine was quickly served along with 2 small plates of appetizers. Lu Yin's appetite was whetted, and he poured himself a cup of wine and downed it in one gulp. He exhaled comfortably. The taste was still the same. He was not that familiar with Duke Yushan, and the greatest help the man had given him was to provide him with a good place to drink. Although the scenery was not elegant, it was located in a bustling city, and there was a noisy bar nearby, but it still gave off a feeling of being hidden in the city. The place was good, the wine was good, and the appetizers were even better. Lu Yin relaxed a lot. "Another flask of wine," Lu Yin called out. The boss nodded and served Lu Yin a second flask of wine. He looked at Lu Yin and was stunned for a moment before his expression changed. You. Lu Yin raised a hand to stop the boss from speaking and pointed to the side. He was not the only one in the tavern. The boss understood and nodded respectfully before retreating. Lu Yin continued to drink and the boss quickly served up a few more appetizers. Lu Yin smiled. "Boss, how's business these days?" The boss heard the question and hurriedly ran over. It's been good. Lu Yin saw that the boss was nervous and waved him away. "Oh, who's that?" Someone who doesn't know better might think that it's the crown prince. A youth at a nearby table mocked Lu Yin. Lu Yin was flabbergasted. Someone was looking for trouble with him. The tavern owner's expression changed drastically, and he hurriedly went over to persuade them. However, the people at the table were clearly drunk. One of them spat on the ground and said, "Brat, it's not your turn to show off here. Do you understand?" Lu Yin did not turn around and continued to drink. "Brat, I'm talking to you. Can't you hear me?" The tavern owner hurriedly pulled the drunkard aside and said something. Lu Yin tapped on the table with a single finger, making a very rhythmic sound. Every tap was exactly the same as the drunkard's heartbeat. The drunkards hadn't noticed at first, but when the tapping stopped, their heartbeats suddenly stopped and their faces turned pale. They suddenly gasped for breath, almost suffocating. Because they were panting heavily, their breaths reeked of alcohol and they sobered up a lot. They looked at Lu Yin in shock, knowing that they had offended someone they couldn't afford to offend. One of them hurriedly apologized. "Brother, we're sorry. We drank too much, so we'll pay for your drinks today. Goodbye." He then left behind some money and hurriedly ran off. Lu Yin poured himself a cup of wine and took a sip. He liked the feeling of cooking wine in the cold wind in 100 different dishes. The tavern owner looked at Lu Yin as if he was a god. Just tapping on the table was enough to suffocate the drunkards. This was the royal regent's power. Far away from the tavern, in the shadows of a corner, a few people silently retreated. They had originally come to assassinate Lu Yin and had been waiting at King Zishan's palace for a long time. Just as they were about to make their move, they saw the scene just now. Even though Lu Yin hadn't made a move, the stifling pressure that had been stifling had terrified them. Lu Yin wasn't someone they could assassinate. Someone walked out from the tavern and looked towards the open-air tavern. The tapping on the table had shaken him, as if the sound had suppressed something through the air. He looked towards the open-air tavern and saw Lu Yin, but he couldn't see his face clearly. After some thought, he walked over. Soon enough, he sat down in the tavern and asked for a jug of wine from the owner. He took a sip and glanced at Lu Yin. Coincidentally, Lu Yin looked up and met the man's eyes. The man's pupils shrank and he subconsciously stood up and bowed. "Wukai Mathers greets your highness." The conflict that had just occurred had scared away the other customers in the tavern, leaving Lu Yin alone. Wukai Mathers's bow startled the owner, who hurriedly bowed as well. "Greetings, your highness." Lu Yin smiled. "We're all wine tasters in this tavern, so there's no need to call me your highness. Owner, give me another jug." "Yes, your highness." The owner hurriedly left. Lu Yin looked at Wukai Mathers, his gaze pausing on his left arm. "Is your arm fake?" Wukai Mathers respectfully replied, "Yes, it was destroyed by a plant during Astral 10's exam." Lu Yin nodded. Sit down, let's drink together. Wukai Mather's expression changed, but he eventually sat down. He was filled with boundless gratitude towards Lu Yin. If not for Lu Yin, his father would have been dead. Now that Lu Yin had released his father, the Mathers family would never be able to repay this favor. The Mathers family had once been part of the Zishan bloodline, so they were naturally close to Lu Yin. I've known your father for a long time, Lu Yin said. Wukai Mathers replied, I've heard him mention it. Lu Yin smiled and looked at Wukai Mathers. You're very powerful. Among the younger generation of the Great Yu Empire, no one is your match aside from Schutz. Wukai Mathers respectfully replied, You're too kind, Your Highness. The 5 Hall Masters of Yu Academy are all very powerful. Lu Yin laughed. Although they've improved a lot, their thinking is still too limited. Aside from Schutz, it's difficult for the others to leave the Outerverse, but you're different. Lu Yin's gaze then landed on Wukai Mathers's right arm, or more accurately his right hand. He had noticed earlier that Wukai Mathers's aura was extraordinary, and he had filled his eyes with star energy to take a closer look. Just as he had said, aside from Schutz, none of the other 4 Hall Masters could compare to Wukai Mathers. This was especially true for Wukai Mathers' right fist, which had an unusually large number of rune lines that far surpassed the Outerverse limiters. Wukai Mathers was already very close to the Innerverse elite limiters. Although he still couldn't compare to the Astral Combat Academy's area masters, his future achievements wouldn't be limited. Wukai Mathers stood up and respectfully said, Your Highness, during Astral 10's exam, this humble one accidentally obtained a battle technique from a cliff. It's called the Stone-Crushing Fist. This humble one has relied on this battle technique to reach my current level of strength. Lu Yin nodded and gestured for Wukai Mathers to sit down. He didn't really care about the Stone-Crushing Fist. There were many strange battle techniques in the universe and many of them had miraculous effects. This was very normal since he himself knew the serious technique. This battle technique was extremely powerful, and although it wasn't enough for him, it could still help him turn danger into safety at a critical moment. The Sword Sect's 13 swords, the Day-Night Clan's Night's End, Daybreak, and the Day-Night Restoration technique were all battle techniques that could dominate an entire era. Lu Yin's vision had long since transcended the Outerverse, so he had no interest in Wukai Mathers' battle techniques. Tianming has gone to Grand Top Weave. From tomorrow onwards, you will replace him and become Yu Academy's Hall Master, Lu Yin said after taking a sip of wine. He then stood up and left. Wukai Mathers stared blankly at Lu Yin's departing figure. How had he become a Hall Master so easily? Not too long ago, Yu Academy had been an elite training ground that he didn't even have the qualifications to enter. Now he had actually become a Hall Master. He stood up excitedly and bowed deeply to Lu Yin's back. The strong would rise while the weak would fall. This was Lu Yin's rule, and Wukai Mathers' ability was enough to become a Hall Master. After leaving the tavern, Lu Yin didn't return to King Zishan's palace. Instead he went to the seaside to sober up. He didn't like to force the alcohol out of his system as that would make drinking meaningless. Sometimes getting tipsy could help him relax. After disappearing for a few hours, Lu Yin finally returned to King Zishan's palace, where he was surprised to see a familiar face, Geraldine. During Earth's trial, Geraldine had been captured and threatened by Lu Yin. She was the first person he had ever met who wasn't a friend. Geraldine hadn't expected to run into Lu Yin at the entrance of King Zishan's palace. She was flustered and didn't know what to do. Lu Yin laughed. Let's go in and have a seat. Geraldine hurriedly replied, There's no need. Oh, I'm sorry. Greetings, Your Highness. Lu Yin looked at her. You're here for something? Geraldine nodded and took out a ring. I'll return this to you. Lu Yin took it. What's this? Jenny Anna accidentally dropped it and I picked it up. I'm returning it to you, Geraldine said. Lu Yin recalled that he had given Jenny Anna a ring in order to gain the Anna family's support. He had gotten it from the die roll. Accidentally dropped it? Or did you throw it away? Geraldine blinked. Accidentally, I guess. Then how did you know it was mine? Lu Yin asked. Geraldine's eyes darted around, not knowing how to answer. Lu Yin tossed the ring to her. You can have it. He then stepped into King Zishan's palace, not caring about the ring at all. Geraldine caught it in shock and stared blankly at Lu Yin's back. Lu Yin stopped. Do you want to come in? We haven't seen each other in a long time. Geraldine shook her head in panic. No, thank you. She bowed again and ran off. Lu Yin was puzzled. Why was she panicking? He didn't know what it meant to give a girl a ring, and Geraldine's mind was in a mess. She didn't dare enter King Zishan's palace. Leisure time always passed quickly, and after a relaxing day, Lu Yin once again entered a busy state. The military, the government, and everywhere else were recommending people to join the four ministries. Lu Yin didn't know who was capable and who wasn't, but he did know that they all represented their own interests. He wanted to cross them all out, but he was afraid that he would really miss out on someone capable. He had no choice but to leave it all to Xianxia. She was so busy that she didn't even have time to eat. Chapter 548. Inya was in charge of all matters within the Lu Ministry of Defense, and Xianxia Ana was only a figurehead. Similarly, if Xianxia had withdrawn from the 13 imperial squadrons, Lu Yin would definitely have given the Hua family a position of power. This was a balance, as both the Ana and Hua families had a certain amount of influence within the Great Yu Empire's military. Wendy Yushan rarely appeared in public these days, and Lu Yin had seen her once. He knew that she was cultivating the Yu secret art, but she had yet to appear in public. Actually, she was also trying to avoid arousing suspicion. The Great Yu Empire could not have two leaders, and she was not suited for management. Thus she was willing to live behind the scenes. On this day, Lu Yin had just returned to King Zishan's palace after the court session ended when Bronson reported that someone was requesting an audience. When Lu Yin arrived at the guest hall, he saw a man with a downcast expression who was anxiously waiting for him. When the man saw Lu Yin, he hurriedly bowed. North Castle Weave's Greatsword Dynasty's Ding Xing greets your highness, the royal regent of the Great Yu Empire. He then sat down and looked at Ding Xing. Are you from North Castle Weave? Ding Xing replied, yes, I'm from North Castle Weave's Greatsword Dynasty. Back then, when the Innerverse various great powers fought over the Greatsword Dynasty, it was destroyed by the Second Great Hall. Fortunately, Captain Shalosh from the Great Yu Empire saved me, and I was only able to survive. Lillian had told him about this matter, and it was because of this that he had learned about the struggle for Pyrolite. It was also because of this person in front of him that the conflict between the Great Yu Empire and the Second Great Hall had started. What can I do for you, Mr. Ding? Lu Yin asked. Ding Xing suddenly knelt down on one knee and said sorrowfully, Your Highness, please help the Greatsword Dynasty to expel the Second Great Hall. Lu Yin raised a hand and a powerful force forcibly lifted Ding Xing up. Ding Xing was a cruiser with a power level of 60,000, but he was unable to resist Lu Yin's strength at all. Ding Xing stared at Lu Yin in shock. Hearing about it was one thing, but experiencing it for himself was another. At this moment, Ding Xing truly understood what it meant to be an unequaled Lemiter. This person in front of him actually made him feel like he was unrivaled. Ding Xing was a cruiser while this person was just a Lemiter. However, Ding Xing quickly recalled Lu Yin's battle records and felt relieved. Even an enlighter had been killed by this person, so a mere cruiser was no different from an ant. Mr. Ding, there's no need for such formalities, Lu Yin said. Ding Xing pleaded, Your Highness, the Greatsword Dynasty's inheritance has been lost for generations. As a citizen of the Greatsword Dynasty, I cannot bear to see this happen, so I beg for your Highness' help. Lu Yin did not immediately reply. He pondered for a moment before opening up a star chart on his gadget to check out North Castle Weave. The Greatsword Dynasty was a rather powerful power in North Castle Weave, and its geographical location was very similar to the Great Yu Empire's. It was a long strip that spanned across North Castle Weave from north to south, and it had about 9 filaments. It was no wonder why the Second Great Hall wanted to seize control of the Greatsword Dynasty, as this dynasty was just too suitable to be used to fight for Pyrolite. Ding Xing lowered his head, not daring to move. Lu Yin looked at the star chart and his eyes flickered. Mr. Ding, you should know that there are currently 2 enlighters in North Castle Weave. If I make a move, the consequences will be immeasurable. Ding Xing respectfully replied, I understand. I also know that with your Highness's strength, you don't need to fear an enlighter. Your Highness, I'm willing to give you the treasures that the Greatsword Dynasty has accumulated over countless years in exchange for your assistance. Lu Yin was surprised. Treasures? Yes. North Castle Weave's geographical location is special, and the dynasty's emperors all knew that something would happen sooner or later. That's why they left behind treasures to restore the dynasty. Generally speaking, this amount of treasures should be enough to deal with the Outerverse powers, but I never expected that an Enlighter would take action. No matter how many treasures there are, it's useless against an Enlighter. Your Highness, please help us. I'm willing to give you the treasures, Ding Xing said sincerely. Lu Yin's eyes lit up. Treasures were a very tempting term, and North Castle Weave was also very tempting to him. Grand Top Weave alone was not enough to satisfy him, so he could use the Greatsword Dynasty's matter to make a move against North Castle Weave. However, this was not the time to do so. The Great Yu Empire could not even manage Frostwave Weave properly, and it would take a very long time to suppress Grand Top Weave. If he tried to make a move against North Castle Weave as well, he would easily be dragged down to his death. Furthermore, he was already known as the nemesis of Enlighters, so it would not be easy for him to deal with another Enlighter. Even if he succeeded in killing another Enlighter, he might attract the attention of many other Enlighters. If 2 or even 3 Enlighters acted against him, he would not even know how he died. Lu Yin constantly reminded himself that his current accomplishments were not due to his own strength, but rather to external factors. He could not be complacent. Stay on Zenithstar for now. I can promise you that I will help the Greatsword Dynasty, but not now, Lu Yin said to Ding Xing. Ding Xing's eyes flickered and he softly replied, Yes, Your Highness. Many thanks. Lu Yin grunted and Bronson escorted Ding Xing out. He could not interfere with North Castle Weave for the time being, but Ding Xing had to be left behind as a bait to invade North Castle Weave in the future. The separation of the Innerverse and Outerverse had a huge impact on the Outerverse, and it also affected the Outerverse Youth Council. The Outerverse Youth Council was subordinate to the 10 Arbiters Council, and many of its policies came from the council. Now that the Innerverse and Outerverse could not be connected, the Outerverse Youth Council could only formulate its own policies. Without the 10 Arbiters' deterrence, the Outerverse Youth Council would face a crisis. Under these circumstances, Puyu took charge of East San Dios, and he summoned Wendy Yushan and Lu Xiaoge for a meeting. Wendy Yushan told Lu Yin about this, but he immediately rejected it. You can't go. You have a secret technique and all the Enlighters are watching you. If you appear in East San Dios, you might be captured. It's my duty, Wendy Yushan said. Lu Yin frowned. The 10 Arbiters Council has taken great care of me. Now that the council is in danger, I have to go, Wendy Yushan said resolutely. Lu Yin thought about it. I'll go with you. Wendy Yushan did not refuse, as this was the best solution. With Lu Yin around, her safety was guaranteed. Lu Yin felt a headache coming on, as Hai Chi-Chi had taken his collapsible spacecraft to the Astral River. When are we going? The meeting is in 12 days, Wendy Yushan said. Lu Yin calculated that it would take 2.5 months for a normal spacecraft to travel from the Great Yu Empire to East San Dios. With the speed of a radiant-grade aurora, it would take less than 8 days. If he factored in the changes in routes and unexpected situations, they would have to leave by tomorrow at the latest. We'll leave tomorrow, Lu Yin said. Wendy Yushan nodded and left King Zishan's palace. After Wendy Yushan left, Lu Yin increased the speed at which he dealt with administrative matters and delegated many tasks to his subordinates. He would be gone for at least a month, and if all the administrative matters piled up during that time, he would die from exhaustion. Beep 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 beep. His gadget beeped and Lu Yin was surprised to see that it was Lu Xiaoge. He suddenly had a bad premonition, as Lu Xiaoge would not call him for no reason. He accepted the call, and Lu Xiaoge's image appeared on his screen. He beamed at Lu Yin. Brother Lu, I heard that you're here to die. Lu Yin's face sank, as that was indeed the case. What do you mean? Lu Xiaoge feigned surprise. Brother Lu, you don't know? Many Enlighters want to kill Brother Lu and steal Wendy Yushan's secret technique. Someone has already made a move. Who? Lu Yin asked. Lu Xiaoge's lips curled up. Darkstar Gorge and the Ross Empire. I only know of those 2. There should be others, but I don't know if they're participating in this operation. Lu Yin's heart sank. They had used the San Dios Council to lure Wendy Yushan out. These people were certain that Lu Yin would not allow Wendy Yushan to come out alone. Luring Wendy Yushan out would be the same as luring him out. More than one enlighter would act, and this was a dead end. In the Outerverse, it was already difficult to find an enlighter, let alone 2 or more. Even if Lu Yin had progenitor Wuxiang's hide, the gun and the money bomb, he would not be able to deal with multiple enlighters at once. Brother Lu, this situation isn't easy to deal with. Lu Xiaoga smiled. Lu Yin looked at Lu Xiaoga's sly smile and suddenly thought of silver. Why are you telling me this? Lu Xiaoga shrugged. If you die, what will I use to fight against Puyu? Now that the innerverse and outerverse have been separated, it doesn't matter if you control Sandios. The enlighters are the ones who truly decide the situation, Lu Yin said. Lu Xiaoga smiled. The innerverse and outerverse will eventually recover and then everything will change again. Besides, I'm representing Arbiter Zhenwu, and the Day-Night clan won't just stand by and watch me get bullied. Is Night Queen Chuyu participating? Lu Yin asked. Lu Xiaoga was helpless. Brother Lu, you overestimate me. It's already not easy for me to get this information. Puyu won't truly trust me. Lu Yin ended the call with Lu Xiaoga as he could sense the severity of the situation. It was best not to go, but would it really be safe if he did not go? Those enlighters would not give up on the secret technique, and if he did not go, they would definitely come to the Great Yu Empire. At that time, the Great Yu Empire would be plunged into misery and suffering. Lu Yin only had one option, and that was to go. He would pretend not to know anything and secretly make preparations. Against multiple enlighters, all of his preparations might not be of any use. These enlighters were determined to guard against him, and progenitor Wuxiang's hide would not be able to stun them, and the gun would not be able to hit them. This was too tricky. He looked up at the sky and saw that it was getting late. The next day would arrive soon, and after some thought he decided to contact Granny Chan. Perhaps he could ask her for help. Not long after, Lu Yin put down his gadget with an ugly expression. Granny Chan had rejected his request. Lu Yin was not surprised, as enlighters knew how to seek fortune and avoid calamity. Since he had suddenly invited her to Sandios, she would naturally be able to guess that he would be in danger. Currently, only enlighters could threaten him, and there was more than one of them. She would naturally reject his request. Everything had its pros and cons. The innerverse and outerverse had been separated, and the various great powers had been expelled. Without the python that had coiled around them, many people could do whatever they wanted without worrying about anything else. But at the same time, the outerverse had become even more lawless, and it did not matter how high one's status was. Take the Nalan family for example. So what if they had the backing of the Sword Sect? Without the help of an enlighter, they could only hide in the Great Yu Empire. The various identities that Lu Yin had worked so hard to obtain were now useless, as no one would stand up for him. Chapter 549. Bronson, go to the warehouse and get me all the universal armors, Lu Yin ordered. An hour later, all the universal armors from Zenustar's warehouse were piled up in King Zishan's palace. There were more than 10,000 sets in total. Your Highness, if that's not enough, I'll go to the warehouses of other planets to get more, Bronson said respectfully. No need, that's enough, Lu Yin replied and waved for Bronson to leave. He blocked off the monkey and raised his hand, causing his die to appear. Lu Yin placed all of the universal armors into his cosmic ring and then placed it down. He tapped it with his finger, causing the die to slowly spin until it finally stopped at -4. Lu Yin instantly grabbed the cosmic ring and entered the time-stop space with the die's possession. It had been a long time since he had entered the time-stop space, so he didn't have much time to think about it. He rolled the die again, and this time he rolled a enhance. It was useless, as enhance, and enhance were all useless in the time-stop space. Here he had to rest for 10 days every time he rolled it. After 10 days, Lu Yin rolled the die again and rolled a enhance. His eyes lit up as both enhance and enhance were useless, but he needed them now because he had something to disassemble: the universal armors. Of course, he wasn't going to disassemble the ones that had been upgraded so many times that they could defend against enlighters. Instead, he was going to disassemble the universal armors that Bronson had brought over, and there were more than 10,000 of them. Lu Yin used star crystals to increase the disassembling time to a few hours and then placed the universal armors into the disassembling vortex. Under Lu Yin's astonished gaze, the universal armors disappeared and were replaced with all sorts of strange materials: one of which was what Lu Ying needed the most: polarium. Over 10,000 sets of universal armors had disassembled nearly 500 tons of polarium. Polarium was a rare metal, and it could be used to make many other things besides universal armors. Its mass was the complete opposite of pyrrolite. Pyrrolite was large and light, while polarium was small and heavy. A palm-sized piece of polarium weighed dozens of kilograms. Usually, a set of universal armor would only consume a palm-sized piece of polarium, but it could be sold for a high price, which showed how valuable polarium was. 500 tons of polarium was very valuable, but that wasn't what Lu Ying needed. What he needed was polarium essence. Polarium essence could be considered the essence of polarium, and even tens of thousands of tons of polarium might not necessarily produce polarium essence. Polarium essence was far more useful than polarium, and Lu Ying suspected that the universal armor that he had purchased from the auction house, which could defend against attacks with a power level of 100,000, was actually made from polarium essence. For the sake of Shenwu continent, Lu Ying had used Shuda planet to sow discord between the Dark Mist Weave and Dark Star Gorge. Shuda planet produced polarium, which was very valuable to the major powers. Although it could not compare to pyrrolite, it had different uses. Pyrrolite was a strategic weapon, while polarium was the main material for many weapons and equipment. A Shuda planet that produced polarium was enough to cause conflict. What if polarium was found on this Shuda planet? It was impossible for Shuda planet to have polarium essence, as if Dark Star Gorge had dared to set their sights on Shuda planet. The Dark Mist Weave's various powers would have already gone all out against Shuda planet. Even if a planet that produced polarium had polarium essence, it would only contain a few tons at most. Polarium essence the size of a palm could be used to create universal armor that could defend against a hunter's attacks. This was the value of polarium essence, and in the long run it could even surpass pyrrolite. What if dozens or even hundreds of tons of polarium essence suddenly appeared? Lu Ying did not dare to imagine it. If a large amount of polarium essence was found on Shuda planet, then the planet would explode just like planet pyrrolite. It would be enough to attract the attention of enlighters, such as the almighty enlighter from Dark Star Gorge and the enlighter from Dark Mist Weave. It was a good idea, but whether or not it could be done depended on the will of the heavens. Another 10 days passed and Lu Ying rolled his die again. He rolled a pi one, but it was still useless. He used over 1,000 star crystals to increase the time in the time-stop space by 30 days, and then another 10 days passed. Lu Ying tapped his die and it slowly spun until it finally stopped at a 3. This was it, as these were the 3 pi 1 points that were most helpful to him. When he saw the 2 screens appear, Lu Ying casually tossed a piece of polarium essence onto the first screen, followed by over 100 star essence. The polarium essence was upgraded 3 times, and it went from the most common polarium essence to the dimly glowing polarium essence. As he stroked the polarium essence, Lu Ying sighed in amazement. A single piece of polarium essence could be sold for tens of thousands of star crystals, and upgrading it to polarium essence required roughly 1 star essence, which was roughly 100,000 star crystals. Wasn't this a huge loss? Lu Ying was helpless. Forget it, polarium essence was something that couldn't be bought in large quantities even if one had the money. So what if it was a loss? It would depend on how it was used. Upgrading 500 tons of polarium essence to polarium essence cost Lu Ying a total of over 10,000 star essence. Lu Ying felt his heart bleed when he saw this, as he had lost another 10,000 star essence. He would definitely get his revenge from the almighty enlighters. He still had over 12,000 star essence left, and Lu Ying took out a piece of flesh that flickered with lightning. This was something that he had obtained from the auction house. According to the monkey, this was a void thunderbeast's flesh, and it could be used to tear through the void and escape. It was extremely difficult to obtain. He tossed the flesh onto the upper screen and then tossed over 1,000 star essence onto it. As he watched the flesh upgrade, he suddenly had a thought. Could it upgrade a void thunderbeast? The die's enhance was truly mystical, as it could upgrade anything. Lu Ying sometimes couldn't help but want to try and see if he could make a breakthrough. Needless to say, this idea was very tempting. The first upgrade of the lightning flesh had cost him over 1,000 star essence, and the second upgrade had cost him over 2,000 star essence. Lu Ying almost couldn't hold on any longer, but after thinking about it, he decided to upgrade it a 3rd time. The third upgrade cost him over 5,000 star essence. And at this moment the lightning that flickered within the flesh had changed color, causing the void to faintly become unstable. Lu Yin guessed that this thing would allow him to escape very far in one go. He filled his eyes with star energy and saw that the boundless number of rune lines actually surpassed Karthika's, which was astonishing. It would definitely allow him to escape from the range of an enlighter's pursuit in one go. This was a life-saving item that he wanted to give to Wendy Yushan. It had cost him over 8,000 star essence and it was definitely the most expensive tool for escaping. Lu Yin looked at his cosmic ring and saw that he still had over 3,000 star essence left. After thinking about it, he decided to use 3,300 star essence to upgrade a money bomb, one that could instantly kill an enlighter. This was also a life-saving item that he wanted to give to Wendy Yushan. He had his universal armor and gun, while Wendy Yushan had her own lightning flesh and money bomb. If they were lucky, they would be able to deal with this crisis. He hoped that everything would go according to his plan. Otherwise, he really did not know how to survive this crisis. Lu Yin spent the entire night deep in thought. The next day he told Wendy Yushan everything that had happened. Wendy Yushan's eyes turned cold and she gripped her sword tightly. Lu Yin slowly said, "Go to San Daoist and tell Puyu that you're going there alone, and that I'm still in the Great Yu Empire." Wendy Yushan nodded and did not ask any more questions. She trusted Lu Yin as he would not allow her to be captured by an enlighter. Lu Yin looked at her. "Be careful." He then gave her an upgraded money bomb and lightning flesh. This money bomb is enough to heavily injure or even kill an enlighter. As for this piece of flesh, it came from a void thunder beast. If you encounter any danger, you can use it to tear through the void and escape. It should be quite far away. Wendy Yushan silently put it away and then looked at Lu Yin with a worried expression. "What about you? Where are you going?" Lu Yin's gaze turned cold. "To hunt." Wendy Yushan retracted her gaze. "If we survive this, I'll marry you." She then coldly walked out of King Zishan's palace. Lu Yin was stunned for a long time. Had she misunderstood something? He had never planned on marrying her. However, when he looked at Wendy Yushan's beautiful face, he could not help but feel his heart skip a beat. To be honest, this woman was extremely attractive to men, especially those who wanted to conquer. To the Great Yu Empire, Wendy Yushan was a goddess, and Lu Yin had been seduced by her. "Congratulations, seventh bro. You've finally seen the light of day." "Huh." The monkey cackled. Lu Yin rolled his eyes. If Wendy Yushan really wanted to marry him, would he reject her? Ming Yan's figure suddenly appeared in his mind, and her hair was still in his cosmic ring. Lu Yin immediately shook his head and told himself not to think too much about it. However, for some reason Madame Nalan appeared in his mind as well. East San Daoist was located in Adonis Weave, while Shuda Planet was located at the intersection of Dark Mist Weave and Wuri Weave. Shuda Planet was closer to East San Daoist than East San Daoist. If they had set off at the same time, then he would have arrived 2 days before Wendy Yushan. 2 days was not a long time, so Lu Yin immediately set off. He boarded a radiant grade aurora and rushed towards Shuda Planet. Ever since Shuda Planet had become the focus of conflict, the planet had completely changed. In the past, Shuda Planet had produced a strange metallic life form capable of producing polarium, which had led to it being occupied by the 9 allied nations and a few other powers from Dark Mist Weave. Aside from the younger generation of Dark Mist Weave who were training on the planet, the rest of the population were mostly miners. There were no cities, only mining towns. Nowadays, battles would break out on Shuda Planet every once in a while. Darkstar Gorge and the 9 allied nations had come into contact several times, but neither side was prepared to give up on Shuda Planet. However, neither side wanted to start a war over a single planet, so the younger generation of both sides often fought on the planet and had already destroyed several mining towns. Shuda Planet had been divided into several regions, and both sides did their best not to step into each other's territory. Under such circumstances, Lu Yin arrived at Shuda Planet. There were many planets in the universe that were similar to Shuda Planet, but they were often not suitable for ordinary people to live in. Only cultivators could barely survive, and some of these planets were even worse than outer space. They were filled with deadly poisonous gases, high temperatures, magma, gales, and other unexplainable phenomena. Shuda Planet was one of the better ones, at least a sentinel could survive there. Lu Yin stepped onto the planet's dry and cracked ground, and strange bugs poked their heads out from time to bite him. These bugs were large and could swallow a person in one bite. Lu Yin casually waved his hand, causing a gust of wind to peel off a layer of the ground and crush many of the bugs hidden in the cracks into a puddle of blood. Chapter 550. The air was scorching hot, and when Lu Yin looked up he saw two suns radiating high temperatures that baked the land. Lu Yin released his domain but he didn't see anyone. Instead he saw a strange metallic life form that looked like a claw. It had no eyes, ears, mouth or nose, and if it didn't move, it looked like a mechanical component. This was a metallic life form from Shuda planet. Lu Yin was rather surprised and he picked up the claw-like metallic life form and stabbed it at the monkey's head. Lu Yin exerted a bit of force and the claw cracked before collapsing and falling to the ground. It trembled a few times before becoming motionless. It was probably dead. Even such life forms exist? The universe is too mysterious. Lu Yin exclaimed. The monkey was disdainful. What's that? It's not even a life form. It's just being parasitized by some strange substance. Seventh bro, you haven't seen a truly strange life form. Like a Tian Ho? Lu Yin asked. The monkey stopped talking. Tian Ho was a life form that covered everything and it was too mysterious. It was basically a black hole that had gained sentience and even a Tian Ho existed. Lu Yin was no longer amazed by the universe's mysteries. By the way, I don't even know what species you are. Lu Yin suddenly asked. The monkey was proud. I'm from the Ghost Monkey clan, a noble life form in the astral beast domain. Is that so? But as far as I know, there's no Ghost Monkey clan. Lu Yin obviously didn't believe the monkey. This was one of the reasons why he had never believed in the monkey's existence. The monkey sighed. Seventh bro, the astral beast domain is a hopeless situation for you humans. How could you possibly know how many races there are? It's just like how you've never been to this planet, so how could you possibly have seen this metallic life form? Also, how could you possibly know about all the civilizations in the human domain? Lu Yin didn't refute the monkey's words. He turned on his gadget and found that the signal was distorted and intermittent. There were too many metals on this planet, so it was normal for the signal to be affected. However, this wasn't good for Lu Yin, as he was planning on using the polarium essence to attract enlighters. The only place that could normally connect to the universe's network was the mining city. He thought about it and flew into the distance. When he landed on the planet, he could faintly see a mining city in the east. Ever since the universe had undergone a great change, only powerhouses at the level of a hunter could tear through the void. It was almost impossible for anyone else to tear through the void to move about, and Lu Yin was no exception. Space was so stable that even he could not tear through it, so he could only fly. Fortunately, his flying speed wasn't slow, and it didn't take long for him to see the mining city. Most importantly, he saw a huge machine standing on the ground like a monster, baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. In the south of the mining city, a huge tornado was gradually forming. Miners from all directions were returning to the mining city. Lu Yin snatched a miner's clothes and entered the mining town naturally. He received news that a super strong gale was coming, one that could even blow away cultivators. All of the miners and trial takers had fled to the nearest mining town to take shelter. The mining city had a protective shield. When the wind blew, the entire mining city shook, but no one was worried that the mining city would be destroyed. This kind of wind was common on Shuda planet. Even if it was a few levels stronger, it would not be able to destroy the mining city. The mining city was very messy, and the miners and trial takers were separated from each other. The trial takers looked down on the miners, and the miners did not dare enter the trial takers area. The two areas were like two separate cities. One was messy and dilapidated, while the other was clean and tidy with all sorts of service facilities. This mining city belonged to the 9 allied nations, and the trial takers here were the younger generation of the Dark Mistweave. If Lu Yin had known that there would be so many trial takers here, he would not have disguised himself as a miner. He looked at the flashing neon lights in the distance and decided not to go. In the mining city, the network signal was much more stable. There was no lack of bars in the mining city. The miners here did not have much entertainment, and they could only get drunk in the bars during their free time. When they woke up, they would go back to mining. Because of the high mortality rate, many miners either sent the money they earned back to their families or squandered it here. Therefore, there was no shortage of call girls in the bars, even though they all looked average. Lu Yin sent away 3 groups of call girls and left the bar. Before he left, he purposely dropped a small piece of polarium essence. After leaving the bar, he found a set of slightly better clothes and headed to the trial takers area. The environment of the trial takers area was much better than that of the miners area. The bar's environment and the quality of the call girls were completely different. Lu Yin dropped another piece of polarium essence and then headed to the next bar. Not long after, a strong wind swept through the area outside the mining city, as if it was going to drown the entire city. Many fights broke out within the mining city over the polarium essence that Lu Yin had purposely dropped. There were polarium essences in both the miners and trial takers areas, and the sudden appearance of more than 10 pieces of polarium essence shocked the upper echelons of the mining city. They began a secret search of the mine, wanting to know the origin of the polarium essence. There was only one possibility for polarium essence to appear on this planet. Someone had dug it out. The most likely possibility was that a miner had dug out a polarium essence mine. A single polarium essence mine could produce several tons of polarium essence. What kind of concept was that? It was enough to drive people crazy. The entire mining city was sealed off and no one was allowed to leave. Lu Yin easily left the mining city and headed to another. He had already inquired about the location of the next mining city. If polarium essence appeared in one mining city, the upper echelons might be able to conceal it, but if polarium essence appeared in several mining cities at the same time, then it would be impossible to hide it. Furthermore, the fact that polarium essence had appeared in several mining cities proved that the production of polarium essence was very high, and more than one person had obtained it. This would definitely alert the 9 allied nations and Dark Star Gorge. 2 days later, when Wendy Yushan arrived at Adonis Weave, the 9 allied nations received news that a polarium essence mine had appeared on Shuda planet. The entire upper echelon of the 9 allied nations was in an uproar. The value of polarium essence was too high, and it was enough to raise the 9 allied nations' strength to a whole new level. Whether it was used to manufacture weapons or sell them, the profits would be considerable. It wasn't just the 9 allied nations. Dark Star Gorge had also received the news. At the same time, Dark Star Gorge also received another piece of news. Wendy Yushan had appeared in Adonis Weave, but Lu Yin had not come. He was still in the Great Yu Empire. This news puzzled Puyu as Lu Yin should not have allowed Wendy Yushan to come out alone. However, according to the surveillance along the way, Wendy Yushan had indeed appeared alone. Puyu was a cautious person, and even if Wendy Yushan had appeared alone, he was confident that he could deal with her. However, he still notified Dark Star Gorge's enlighter, Elder Wu, and asked for his help. However, Elder Wu had already received news that a polarium essence mine had appeared on Shuda planet, and he had told Puyu to deal with Wendy Yushan on his own while he went to Dark Mist Weave to seize the polarium essence mine. Puyu put down his gadget. He had a nagging feeling that something was off, but he couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was. Polarium essence was very important, and if a large amount of polarium essence was discovered, it would cause Elder Wu to appear. Back then, Elder Wu had almost appeared to personally suppress the 9 allied nations, but he had been apprehensive of the almighty enlighter in Dark Mist Weave and had not wanted to start a war. But now, because of the polarium essence, Elder Wu could no longer sit still. Forget it, as long as Lu Yin doesn't appear, I'm confident that I can deal with Wendy Yushan alone. Besides, there's still Scholar New Moon, Puyu thought to himself. On Shuda planet, a mining town was sealed off, and large spacecraft appeared one after another. When Lu Yin saw this scene, he knew that he had achieved his goal and had done everything he could. If he could not lure out the enlighter from Dark Star Gorge who wanted to deal with him, then he would have no choice but to personally go to San Dios and risk his life. Over the past 2 days, Lu Yin had thrown out more than 100 tons of polarium essence, which had been spread across many mining towns on Shuda planet. Most of it had been seized by the 9 allied nations and Dark Star Gorge. The discovery of so much polarium essence in just 2 short days was shocking to both the 9 allied nations and Dark Star Gorge. They had searched Shuda planet but could not find any traces of polarium essence being mined. This proved that this amount of polarium essence was only on the surface and that there was even more hidden underground. This discovery caused Shuda Planet to go crazy. Regardless of whether it was the miners or the trial takers, they were all locked up in the mining towns and inspected one by one. The conflict between the two sides grew more and more intense. Darkstar Gorge's forces on Shuda Planet were not strong, but they had an enlighter backing them. The 9 allied nations were close to Shuda Planet, and although they could deploy a large number of troops in a short period of time, they did not have an enlighter. With so much Polarium essence appearing, the 9 allied nations were certain that Darkstar Gorge's enlighter Elder Wu would appear. They had no choice but to request the almighty enlighter from Dark Mistweave to step in. Not long after Wendy Yushan appeared in East San Dios, the almighty enlighter from Dark Mistweave also arrived at Shuda Planet and appeared in the mining town that Lu Yin was in. Others might not have been able to sense it, but Lu Yin could feel a power that caused his scalp to go numb. This was not the first time he had faced such a power. Lu Yin's eyes filled with star energy as he looked into the town. About 10 kilometers away from him, there was a majestic number of rune lines that was similar to Lei Long's. Sure enough, the enlighter had arrived. This mining town was under the control of the 9 allied nations, so this enlighter should be from Dark Mistweave. That meant that the enlighter from Darkstar Gorge should be arriving soon as well. Above the planet, Elder Wu received another report from Shuda Planet. Dozens of tons of Polarium essence had been seized from Darkstar Gorge's territory. What did this mean? The 9 allied nations had also seized dozens of tons of Polarium essence, which meant that more than 100 tons of Polarium essence had already been mined. And this was just on the surface. Who knew how much more there was inside the mine? They had to capture the person who knew the location of the mine at all costs. Throwing out 100 tons of Polarium essence would only lure them out. If they wanted to set up a trap, they would need to use other methods. Lu Yin looked at the majestic number of rune lines, and his gaze gradually turned cold. His advantage lay in the shadows. These people had spent so much effort to lure him out, but in the end, it was still unknown who would be the hunter and who would be the prey. In East San Dios, Wendy Yushan appeared in the tower where Puyu and Lu Xiaoga were already waiting for her. Welcome back safely, Wendy. Puyu stood up and looked at Wendy Yushan with delight. Lu Xiaoga had a strange look in his eyes. Wendy Yushan's expression was cold as she stared at Puyu. Let's start the meeting. Puyu smiled. There's no rush. By the way, Wendy, did Lu Yin stay in the Great Yu Empire? Wendy Yushan calmly replied, yes. Why didn't he come with you? Puyu asked curiously. Wendy Yushan frowned. He's not a counselor. He's just an acting counselor. Since I'm here, there's no need for him to come. She then looked at Puyu. Why? Don't you hate him? Do you want him to come? Chapter 551. Puyu nodded. I used to hate him, but now that the innerverse and outerverse have been separated, our council can no longer receive the innerverse support. Our influence in the outerverse has been greatly reduced, especially since the enlighters left behind in the outerverse don't care about us at all. I hope that he can join the council. With his ability to kill enlighters, he'll be a deterrent to the outside world. Wendy Yushan's gaze was icy. If he comes, the first thing he'll do is kill you. Puyu was stunned and his face sank. Lu Xiaoga immediately tried to smooth things over. There's no such thing as an unresolvable grudge. Besides, Counselor Puyu and Brother Lu don't have any deep grudges. Right now, the most important thing is the council's authority and safety, right? Counselor Puyu? Puyu's lips curled up. That's right, Wendy. The council has given you a lot of support. If not for the council, you might not have been able to escape unscathed when you trespassed into the Ross Empire. White Knight has also treated you well, so I hope that you can take responsibility and protect the council at a critical moment. Wendy Yushan calmly replied, I don't need you to tell me that. Otherwise I wouldn't have come. Puyu nodded and his eyes flickered. He did not plan on immediately acting against Wendy Yushan, as her value lay in the Yu secret art. No one knew how the secret technique would be passed on to someone else, but as long as Lu Yin was not around, Wendy Yushan could be dealt with at any time. Right now he was thinking about the Outerverse Youth Council's current situation, and he had not been lying. The Outerverse Youth Council's influence had plummeted, and the most direct manifestation of this was the fact that many people had withdrawn from the council. Once the Outerverse Youth Council's influence was gone, Puyu would be nothing more than a very talented youth in Darkstar Gorge. He would still be killed by an Enlighter and no one would have any qualms about that. Puyu hoped that he could obtain the secret technique while also keeping Wendy Yushan. It would be best if he could use Wendy Yushan's secret technique to rope in Enlighters for the council. That would be perfect. In the current Outerverse, all identities were fake and they were useless. Only Enlighters could be considered as the greatest backers. On Shuda planet, a gale howled as the high temperatures distorted the air. The heat waves from the gale caused the ground to dry up even more. Lu Yin slowly squatted down and looked ahead. There was a huge mine that had originally been filled with miners, but they had all been locked in the mine to the city. There was not a single person inside was a single person, and there was only an army standing guard outside the mine. Lu Yin to enter the mine to leave. I hope that I can get one. Otherwise, it. Lu Yin then left the mine to leave. That to that Lu Yin. And, 2. This area was under the control of Darkstar Gorge. About a day after the inspection of a nearby mining city and the removal of the lockdown, Polarium essence was discovered within the mine. The appearance of Polarium essence shook Darkstar Gorge, and when a large amount of Polarium essence was extracted, Darkstar Gorge's soldiers immediately sealed off the mine. However, it was still too late as the 9 allied nations had already received the news, and that Enlighter had immediately appeared above the mine. Lu, who was hiding underground, was secretly anxious. His target was not this guy but Darkstar Gorge's Elder Wu. It would be better if this guy was alive as he could restrain Elder Wu. He could only blame himself for burying too shallow. No, it was those miners who worked too hard. It was also Elder Wu's fault for appearing too late. Hold on. Lu Yin suddenly felt that something was off. An Enlighter should have been able to travel from Darkstar Gorge to Shuda planet. He filled his eyes with star energy and scanned the area in front of him. He saw a boundless number of rune lines at the bottom of the mine. Lu Yin's eyes flashed. Sure enough, Elder Wu had already arrived, but he had hidden himself. That old man was truly sinister. The Enlighter from Dark Mist Weave casually waved his hand, and Darkstar Gorge's army was swept away, revealing a large amount of Polarium essence within the mine. The Enlighter's entire body was enveloped in black mist as he descended and coldly ordered, "Continue digging." The miners in the mine trembled, but they did not dare to disobey. There were a total of 100 tons of Polarium essence. Lu Yin had not buried it too deeply and he had not done it professionally. Many of the miners had noticed that something was amiss, but none of them dared to say anything in front of an Enlighter. The Enlighter from Dark Mist Weave stored the extracted Polarium essence into his cosmic ring. His eyes occasionally scanned the sky as if he was on guard against something. Lu Yin praised Elder Wu's methods. If not for his mutated eyes, he would not have been able to discover that the old man had hidden himself. Even this Enlighter from Dark Mist Weave would not have been able to discover him. There was a thump as one of the miners dug up a box. Because he had used too much force, his tools flew out of his hands and smashed onto the ground. The miner looked down at the ground in confusion, and the other miners looked over as well. The Enlighter from Dark Mist Weave's eyes flashed. Dig it out. The miner picked up his tools and continued mining. Soon the box was dug out. Hidden in the shadows, Elder Wu looked at the box. This thing had clearly been buried here by someone. What was worth burying in Polarium essence? They were not lock breakers, but if there had been a lock breaker present, they would have immediately recognized that the box was made of spiritual thread, which meant that there was a source box stored inside. However, neither Elder Wu nor the Dark Mist Weave's powerhouse had been able to tell. At some point in time, the ground had been filled with traces of black fog, and even the underground area where Elder Wu was hiding had been covered by it. Elder Wu's attention was attracted by the box, and the Enlighter from Dark Mist Weave suddenly turned sharp as he stared in the direction where Elder Wu was hiding. Black Stinger. As soon as he spoke, the black fog on the ground transformed into an incomparably sharp ray of light that pierced into the void. Many of the miners were instantly killed, and Elder Wu was also pierced by the black light, which pierced through his thigh and abdomen. Top Mist, despicable. Elder Wu barked as he charged out of the ground to attack the Enlighter from Dark Mist Weave. Top Mist sneered. Old man, did you really think that I didn't notice that you were hiding? You're still far from being able to assassinate people from Dark Mistweave. The black fog then transformed into a ray of light that swept towards Elder Wu, causing the entire planet to tremble. Elder Wu was not weak either, and he raised a hand to block the black light. The two enlighters began to exchange blows in the mine. Lu Yin was shocked as these two were too sinister. Elder Wu had arrived a long time ago, but he had hidden himself to launch a sneak attack. That old man called Top Mist was even more sinister. He had clearly noticed Elder Wu, but he had pretended not to notice him before launching a sneak attack. It was no wonder that these old fellows had been able to cultivate to the Enlighter realm. Lu Yin suddenly rejoiced at the fact that he had progenitor Wuxiang's hide. Otherwise, whether it was Karthika or Lei Long, he would not have been able to deal with them. These old fellows were too shrewd. Unfortunately, no matter how shrewd he was, he could not avoid being schemed against. Lu Yin raised a hand and flicked his finger, causing a strong wind to sweep through the void and smash into the box. In an instant, Elder Wu and Top Mist sensed Lu Yin's presence, and the box opened with a click. The formless killing intent emanated from the source box was so strong that even Lu Yin's universal armor was almost unable to withstand it. Lu Yin had upgraded his universal armor many times, and it was now capable of withstanding an Enlighter's attack. In other words, the killing intent emanating from this source box was enough to deal with an Enlighter. Neither Elder Wu nor Top Mist had expected that someone would dare to scheme against them from the shadows. They were two Enlighters, and the person who had schemed against them was not even an explorer. Not even an explorer? Elder Wu's expression changed. Lu Yin, there was no one else besides him. He suddenly figured it out. Wendy Yushan had gone to San Daoist by herself, and Lu Yin had not remained in the Great Yu Empire. Instead, he had hidden himself on Shuda planet and used Polarium essence to lure them away from Wendy Yushan. But it was too late. The terrifying killing intent emanating from the source box enveloped the entire mine and continued to spread. Lu Yin stared fixedly at the source box and watched as the rune lines rapidly spread out. This killing intent had indeed surpassed that of Enlighters like Karthika and Lei Long. Elder Wu and Top Mist did not have enough rune lines, and they were trapped within the killing intent. The two simultaneously stopped and stood in place, not daring to move. Although they could not see the killing intent with their experience, they could still sense it. Top Mist's expression turned ugly. This is a source box, and a boundless advanced source box at that. Carries a formless killing intent that only a boundless advanced lockbreaker can deal with. Elder Wu scanned the area. Junior, come out. I know it's you. Top Mist barked. Who is it? Elder Wu growled. Frostwave weaves Lu Yin. Lu Yin? Top Mist was stunned, but then he remembered. That junior who killed Karthika and Lei Long? Elder Wu's expression turned ugly, and he suddenly took a step back as a hole appeared in the void where he had been standing. Why is Lu Yin on Shuda planet? Top Mist asked as he stared at Elder Wu. Elder Wu did not answer. Instead, he released his star energy to search for Lu Yin. Top Mist did not ask any more questions as Elder Wu had immediately guessed who Lu Yin was, which meant that this matter was related to him. There was no point in asking any more questions as they had already been trapped by the source box's formless killing intent. However, this killing intent alone was not enough to kill them. Top Mist was more worried about the method Lu Yin had used to kill Karthika and Lei Long. Lu Yin, your Frostwave weave has no enmity with my Dark Mist weave, and I won't interfere in your grudge with this old man. Let me leave, and I promise that I won't tell anyone about what happened today, Top Mist said loudly. Elder Wu roared, Top Mist, you're also an Enlighter, so why are you treating a junior like this? The source box's danger isn't enough to kill us, and we can safely retreat in 10 minutes at most. This junior can't possibly deal with two Enlighters like us. Top Mist's eyes narrowed. I've never interfered in other people's grudges. That was the case in the past, and it's the same now. Besides, you're my enemy, not my friend. I can't wait for you to die here. Elder Wu was furious. These rats only knew how to hide in the dark and launch sneak attacks. They were all Enlighters, yet they were still so cowardly. Lu Yin coldly watched the two bicker, and he glanced at Elder Wu and Top Mist's feet. Their positions had shifted quite a bit from before, and he sneered. These two old fellows were intentionally bickering to divert his attention. It would not be easy for them to retreat from the source box's danger zone. As he thought about it, Lu Yin took out another box and threw it between Elder Wu and Top Mist. Seniors, here's another gift for you. When they saw another box appear, Elder Wu and Top Mist's expressions immediately changed. Brother Lu, I have no enmity with you, so please don't kill innocent people. Top Mist shouted with a terrified expression. Many people were more afraid of death the longer they lived, and Top Mist was one such person. Otherwise, he would not have specially cultivated battle techniques that allowed him to hide in the dark and launch sneak attacks. He was very afraid of death. Chapter 552. Elder Wu's face darkened. Junior, I admit defeat. As long as you leave Shuda planet, everything that happened in the past will be written off. I can make the decision that Darkstar Gorge will no longer cause trouble for you, and I can even make you an official member of East San Dios. Top Mist hurriedly spoke up as well. I can also guarantee that you will become an official member of East San Dios. Also, Dark Mist Weave and Frostwave Weave will always be friends. You and I will become friends as well. In order to survive, Top Mist was willing to be shameless. Seniors, your conditions are very tempting. Unfortunately, this junior is afraid of death, and I don't trust the senior's credibility. He then flicked his finger, causing a strong gust of wind to strike the box, causing it to open. Elder Wu and Top Mist stared at the box with wide eyes. If the box released any more formless killing intent, they would immediately retreat, even if it meant sustaining heavy injuries. When the box was completely opened, it was completely empty. There was no source box inside, but there was a piece of progenitor Wuxiang's hide stuck to the box. The two of them glanced at it and their minds trembled. Lu Yin raised his gun and fired at Elder Wu and Top Mist. There were 2 shots in total and Elder Wu's head exploded. Top Mist's head also exploded, but it dissipated into black mist. Lu Yin had missed. Lu Yin's pupils shrank and he stared in shock at the scattered mist. How could this be? He had aimed at Top Mist's head, but the man's head had turned into black mist instead. The black mist that had enveloped Top Mist completely dispersed, and Lu Yin could clearly see Top Mist's appearance. He was stunned. This Top Mist was only 1 meter tall. Top Mist had woken up the moment Lu Yin had fired the second shot. He personally watched the mist above his head disperse, and he looked at Lu Yin with lingering fear. Junior, I almost died at your hands. Lu Yin was in disbelief. This is your true body? Top Mist suddenly leapt up, and the formless killing intent tore several bloody gashes on his arms and legs. He had completely dodged the formless killing intent from the source box, but his body had been struck by the formless killing intent and he crashed to the ground. He spat out a mouthful of blood and looked at the source box in the box with lingering fear. He then looked at Lu Yin with an icy gaze. Lu Yin gripped his gun tightly and aimed at Top Mist. This old man was too cunning. He was clearly 1 meter tall, but he had disguised himself as 2 meters and dodged Lu Yin's fatal shot. This was going to be troublesome. Top Mist raised his hand. Junior, I won't be your enemy. Lu Yin narrowed his eyes. Top Mist spat out a mouthful of blood. There are so many Inlighters from the Innerverse left behind in the Outerverse. Those people are our enemies. Junior, I await your cooperation. He then leaped up, tore through the void and left. He stared at the void and confirmed that the rune lines had disappeared. Only then did he put down the gun, his palms drenched in sweat. If these Inlighters were on guard, then it would be very difficult to kill them. This Top Mist was especially obvious as even Elder Wu had been ambushed by him, and Lu Yin had also been tricked by him. This old fox was extremely cunning. Seventh bro, won't that old man announce what happened to you? The monkey asked worriedly. Lu Yin was worried about this as well. Once the news was made public, then it would be very difficult for him to use his methods of killing Inlighters. Progenitor Wuxiang's hide and his gun would be exposed. I don't care about him. So what if I make it public? He can't recognize Progenitor Wuxiang's hide, and all he knows is that I can knock him out. That's enough, or else he wouldn't have retreated. That's true. There are too few people in this universe who can recognize Progenitor Wuxiang's hide. Even the Sea King might not be able to recognize it. With Elder Wu dead, Darkstar Gorge's desire to kill Lu Yin had been lifted. Now only Scholar New Moon remained. Lu Yin looked up, hoping that Scholar New Moon had not gone to capture Wendy yet. He needed to hurry over. After a long time, Lu Yin finally closed the source box and put away progenitor Wuxiang's hide. He then walked over to Elder Wu's corpse. This was the third enlighter that he had killed. Even the top 10 experts on the top 100 rankings would find it difficult to kill an enlighter, but Lu Yin had done it. Seventh bro, what's the origin of that gun of yours? It can even kill an enlighter, the monkey asked curiously, as he had been wanting to ask this question for a long time. I obtained it during a lock-breaking session. It's an ancient item, Lu Yin answered casually. He then squatted down and removed Elder Wu's cosmic ring. He then extracted some of his blood and collected the polarium essence on the ground before leaving. You obtained it during the lock-breaking session? An ancient item? That can't be right. I've studied archaeology and that gun doesn't look ancient at all, the monkey said doubtfully. It's up to you to believe it or not, Lu Yin replied bluntly. The monkey felt helpless as he had already lamented many times that he would not betray Lu Yin. However, Lu Yin still did not believe him and he was too lazy to even think about it now. News of Elder Wu's death would not spread so quickly, and even if Elder Wu had gone missing, no one would suspect that he had died. What Lu Yin needed to do now was contact Wendy Yushan and ask how she was doing in San Dios. Suddenly, a powerful pressure came from afar. Lu Yin looked up and filled his eyes with star energy. He saw a huge number of rune lines, and although they could not compare to an enlighter's, they were not far off. It was a peak hunter. That direction was under Dark Star Gorge's control, and an expert from the gorge had arrived. Lu Yin hurriedly concealed his star energy and used his physical strength to sprint across the ground towards where his spacecraft was hidden. Soon after, the void where Lu Yin had been standing split open and a man walked out. His face was gloomy, but strangely his eyes were tightly shut. The man sensed the air around him and then chased after Lu Yin. It would be too easy for a hunter to catch up to Lu Yin, but Lu Yin had concealed his star energy. The man had not comprehended a domain, so even if he used his star energy to sweep through space, he would not be able to detect Lu Yin. Lu Yin's domain allowed him to blend into his surroundings. Underground, beneath a giant insect's corpse, Lu Yin looked up through a crack in the ground and saw the hunter from Dark Star Gorge appear before disappearing. Lu Yin's face turned ugly as this person's eyes were tightly shut. It was obvious that he knew about progenitor Wuxiang's hide. It had to be Top Mist, as aside from him, no one else knew that Lu Yin could use progenitor Wuxiang's hide to stun others. What a cunning old fox, Lu Yi cursed inwardly. His opponent had been prepared and he was also a peak hunter. Lu Yin's gun was powerful, but that did not mean that he could hit him. If he did not stun this person, then there was no point in firing. Although his universal armor could block this person's attack, who could guarantee that Top Mist would not ambush him? That old bastard was quite sinister, and even wearing the universal armor was not enough to protect him. It was better to leave this planet as soon as possible and take revenge later. Lu Yin took some time to send a photo of Elder Wu's corpse to Wendy Yushan, and then he slowly made his way underground to where the spacecraft was hidden. It was not easy to avoid being tracked by a powerhouse and reach the spacecraft's location. If he flew, he could reach it quickly, but if he traveled underground, he could only rely on his physical strength. The distance was very long and it would take him at least a few days. A few days later, atop a tall tower in East San Dios, Puyu looked down. The meeting had been going on for several days and everything that needed to be said had been said. Now there was only one thing left to do, which was to force Wendy Yushan to hand over the secret technique and lure Lu Yin out. As long as he could kill Lu Yin and obtain the secret technique, Dark Star Gorge's strength would greatly increase, and he would also gain a powerful ally in Scholar New Moon. Still not going to make a move? She's about to leave. Lu Xiaoge walked up the tower and sat down in a relaxed manner. Puyu's back was to him. Do you think that I'm going to do it? Lu Xiaoge's brows rose. There's someone else? Puyu's lips curled up. That person should be arriving soon. Dark Star Gorge wasn't the only one who had agreed to deal with Lu Yin. Scholar New Moon was also there. Although Elder Wu had gone to Shuda planet, Scholar New Moon had still come. This person's thirst for the secret technique was very strong, and he was determined to kill Lu Yin. Elder Wu had also known that Scholar New Moon would make a move, which was why he had gone to Shuda planet without worry. Puyu wondered what methods Elder Wu had used to ensure that Scholar New Moon would share the secret technique with him after obtaining it. In Wendy Yushan's courtyard, after receiving the photo of Elder Wu's corpse, she knew that it was time to leave. She had come to East San Dios for 2 reasons. First, she had a responsibility, and second, she wanted to resolve this crisis. She could not allow the war to spread to Frostwave Weave, and now that Elder Wu was dead, it was time for her to return. As for the Outerverse Youth Council, its decline was inevitable. With Enlighters around, the Outerverse situation would completely change without the support of the 10 Arbiters. Unless more than one Enlighter supported the Council's influence would gradually disappear. Although Wendy Yushan did not care about the Council's matters, she would never forget the kindness that the Council had shown her. In the future, when she became invincible in the Outerverse with her secret technique, she would re-establish the Outerverse Youth Council as a way to repay the 10 Arbiters Council. With the secret technique, she did not doubt her future strength, unless she died prematurely. Wendy Yushan walked out of the courtyard and looked around. Although the council was destined to decline, no one dared to touch this place. No one could guarantee that the Innerverse and Outerverse would be separated forever. There would be a day when they would recover, and anyone who dared to touch this place would be punished by the 10 Arbiters. No one would take such a risk. There was a thump as a girl fell down nearby. She clutched her forehead as she stood up. Ouch, ouch, ouch. Wendy Yushan glanced at her. Zhao Ran, do you still remember Lu Yin? Zhao Ran stood up with a confused expression. Lu Yin. She thought for a moment and then her eyes lit up. She opened the piece of paper hanging around her neck and looked at it. I remember now. Lu Yin was the one who brought me here. He's a good person. Wendy Yushan looked at her. Do you want to come with me? I'll take you to him. Zhao Ran thought about it and then shook her head. He felt wronged. No need. I often lose my memories and I'm a burden. I don't want to implicate him. Wendy Yushan wanted to say something else, but a white-robed old man with a kind expression slowly walked over. Wendy Yushan's eyes trembled when she saw the old man. She pulled Zhao Ran behind her and stared at him warily. Ross Empire's Scholar New Moon. The old man was Scholar New Moon. Your Excellency Wendy Yushan, long time no see. Have we met before? Wendy Yushan asked coldly. Scholar New Moon smiled. When you barged into the Ross Empire, I saw your battle with my own eyes, but I didn't interfere. Wendy Yushan narrowed her eyes. What are you doing here? Scholar New Moon solemnly replied, Secret Technique Lu Yin. Chapter 553. Wendy Yushan's eyes flickered with murderous intent. Why do you want to kill him? Scholar New Moon sighed. If I don't kill him, then I'll lose my dignity as an Enlighter. How presumptuous of a Limiter to claim to be an Enlighter's nemesis. You're the ones who are pushing me too far, Wendy Yushan said coldly. Scholar New Moon smiled. Is that so? You're still young, so you don't understand. When you're in my position, all the rules no longer matter. Resources belong to the universe, not to individuals or organizations. If I need them, then I can use them. Is that too much? You call yourself a scholar, but you actually believe in such a robber's theory. Wendy Yushan retorted. Scholar New Moon shook his head and sighed. You don't understand, and I don't expect you to either. Alright, tell me the secret technique and I can spare your life. I can even take you as my disciple. Wendy Yushan gripped her sword hilt tightly and took out the money bomb with her left hand. In the distant tower, Puyu and Lu Xiaoge looked over. An Enlighter senior is more confident, Puyu said confidently. Lu Xiaoge's eyes flickered, but no one knew what he was thinking. Inside the courtyard, Wendy Yushan pushed Zhao Ran aside. Stay away. Don't get close. Zhao Ran walked out of the courtyard in a daze. Scholar New Moon sized up Wendy Yushan. Don't worry, I'm not so despicable as to use a normal person to threaten you. Besides, you're not worth my threats. Come over so that I don't have to do anything. You should know the difference between you and an Enlighter. Wendy Yushan unsheathed her sword and slashed at Scholar New Moon. She had used her actions to express her determination. Scholar New Moon shook his head. You don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. He then raised his arm and grabbed forward. Wendy Yushan's 10,000 swords in one sword chi almost tore through the void, but it was shattered by Scholar New Moon. Star energy spread out from his palm and transformed into a giant hand that grabbed at Wendy Yushan. Wendy Yushan was just an explorer, and the difference between her and an enlighter was too great. Her strongest sword chi couldn't even break through Scholar New Moon's star energy. Wendy Yushan's eyes trembled as she saw the giant hand grab her. "You secret art. Void transfer." As soon as she finished speaking, the giant hand formed from star energy suddenly disappeared and reappeared in front of her. Wendy Yushan. Scholar New Moon's attack. Scholar New Moon was astonished. So this was a secret technique. His eyes burned with passion. In the distance, Puyu and Lu Xiaoge were shocked when they saw this scene. An explorer had actually diverted an enlighter's attack. This was a secret technique that could turn something rotten into something miraculous. Scholar New Moon casually waved his hand, causing the giant palm formed from star energy to disappear. He then looked at Wendy Yushan with an expectant gaze. As expected of a secret technique. Hand it over and I guarantee that I won't make things difficult for you. Wendy Yushan suddenly activated her gadget and opened her screen. A headless corpse appeared on the screen. Scholar New Moon, do you recognize this person? Scholar New Moon frowned. I don't know anyone in the Outerverse, so don't even think about using someone else's life to threaten me. Wendy Yushan coldly replied, He's Elder Wu. Scholar New Moon's eyes narrowed. Impossible. He stared at the screen and his expression gradually became one of shock. Puyu descended from the sky and stared at the screen in shock. Elder. It's the Elder. Scholar New Moon looked at Puyu, his gaze cold. Are you sure it's Elder Wu? Puyu nodded, a look of shock on his face. It's an elder. Scholar New Moon looked at Wendy Yushan. Who killed him? What do you think? Wendy Yushan raised her head and pointed her sword at Scholar New Moon. He's almost here. If you want to die, you can stay behind and become the fourth enlighter corpse under his command. That's impossible. That brat killed Karthika and Lei Long by catching them off guard, but Elder Wu was already wary of him. How could an enlighter be killed by that brat? This must be fake. Scholar New Moon shouted. Wendy Yushan retracted her screen. You can judge for yourself whether it's fake or not. In any case, he's almost here. Scholar New Moon's expression changed and he stared at Wendy Yushan. Puyu's eyes were filled with hatred as he was certain that the person on the screen was Elder Wu. The death of Darkstar Gorge's only enlighter was a huge loss to Darkstar Gorge. Darkstar Gorge had offended too many people over the past few years, and once news of Elder Wu's death spread, Darkstar Gorge would be in deep trouble. Senior Lu Yin needs time to arrive, and he definitely doesn't have the strength to easily deal with an enlighter. You can capture this woman first and use her to pressure Lu Yin. You might even be able to obtain the strength that Lu Yin used to kill enlighters, Puyu suggested. Scholar New Moon's eyes flashed and his body suddenly vanished. Wendy Yushan knew that things weren't looking good, so she fired a money bomb in a direction where no one was around. A beam of light shot out from the money bomb, and the next moment, Scholar New Moon appeared beside Wendy Yushan and reached out to grab her. What a powerful attack. That must be the thing that helped you kill Karthika and Lei Long. Unfortunately, I was prepared for it. Wendy Yushan waved her left hand. Use secret art, void transfer. The next moment, the beam of light that had been aimed at no one suddenly disappeared. Scholar New Moon's expression changed and he quickly tried to escape into the void. However, a beam of light appeared in front of him and struck his abdomen, sending him crashing into the ground. It pierced through San Dios and smashed into the Prairie Flame continent. Scholar New Moon had forgotten that since the use secret art could divert another person's attack, it could also divert one's own attack. Wendy Yushan knew that he was on guard against the money bomb, so she had purposely fired it to lure Scholar New Moon out. Only then would she have the opportunity to strike. Reality proved that she had made the right bet, as the money bomb's attack was not easy to defend against. Even if Scholar New Moon did not die, he would still be severely injured. Everything had happened too quickly. Scholar New Moon had only disappeared and reappeared when his entire body was smashed into the Prairie Flame continent. Wendy Yushan slashed out with her sword and sword chi streaked through the void towards Puyu. Puyu was still in shock, but when he saw the sword chi coming at him, he raised his arm. His entire arm suddenly transformed into metal as it transformed into a sharp spear. Green veins covered his arm and blue stripes extended outwards. This was 7-line battle force. There was a thump as Puyu waved his arm and sliced apart the sword chi. He then coldly stared at Wendy Yushan. You want to deal with me? Don't forget that I'm ranked above you. He then leapt towards Wendy Yushan. Now that the universe had changed, they could no longer tear through the void as easily as they had before. However, with Puyu's speed, the average powerhouse would not be able to see him. It was no different from tearing through the void. Wendy Yushan turned her gaze to her right and slashed out with her sword. There was a thump as a powerful shockwave swept out in all directions. Outside the courtyard, Barley and the other counselors hurriedly retreated. Some of the cultivators from the Innerverse who had not yet returned to the Innerverse retreated as well. This shockwave transformed into a fierce shockwave that swept through all of San Dios, splitting the ground. Wendy Yushan retreated a few steps as Puyu growled. His left arm suddenly melted and transformed into a hook-shaped weapon that stabbed towards Wendy Yushan. Wendy Yushan blocked it with her sword and then flipped it around in an attempt to cut off Puyu's neck. However, Puyu did not dodge and his neck turned into metal as well. There was a loud thump as it collided with the sword. Wendy Yushan's attack was unsuccessful as Puyu's left arm transformed into a hook-shaped weapon and stabbed into her shoulder. There was a tearing sound as blood splattered onto the ground. Wendy Yushan's right shoulder had been injured and large chunks of flesh had been torn off. Puyu's arm recovered and his palm was covered in Wendy Yushan's blood. There's a huge gap between us. On planet Pyrolite you couldn't even defeat Night King Gu, so how can you deal with me? Wendy Yushan's left hand covered her right shoulder as a faint halo radiated from her body. She was healing herself. Puyu snorted, and his arm transformed into a metal weapon once again as it stabbed towards Wendy Yushan. Wendy Yushan slashed out more than 10 times in a row, and each strike contained the power to instantly kill Zhanbing Day Knight. Even if Puyu was confident that he could block so many sword chi attacks, he would not choose to face them head-on like Night King Gu. Instead he would choose to avoid them. There was a thump as San Dios shook. Puyu's arm was blocked by Wendy Yushan's sword. Wendy Yushan waved her left hand and Puyu's pupils shrank when he saw this. Not good. It's a secret technique. He immediately retreated without a second thought, but a sword chi slashed out from where he had been standing and tore his clothes apart. Puyu felt a lingering fear, but fortunately he had retreated in time. However, things were not over yet. Wendy Yushan slashed out more than 10 times, and each sword chi attack was redirected by her secret technique and completely engulfed Puyu. San Dios shook violently as smoke and dust filled the air. Everyone watched in a daze as it had been a long time since such an intense battle had taken place here. Both sides were experts ranked in the top 20 of the top 100 rankings. Wendy Yushan panted heavily as she treated her right shoulder and stared at the spot where Puyu had been attacked. A gust of wind blew past and dispersed the dust, revealing Puyu. He was in a very sorry state as Wendy Yushan's sword chi had not been easy to endure. Even Puyu had been injured. He was not Night King Gu and he did not have the Night King's body. He did not have the recovery abilities of the Night King clan. Even though he had relied on his innate gift and battle force to hold on, his internal organs had still been severely suppressed. Lu Yin had guessed that Wendy Yushan's secret technique would allow her to challenge the top 15 of the top 100 rankings. And reality had proven him right. At least for now, Wendy Yushan did not fear Puyu. Puyu's eyes were gloomy as he glared at Wendy Yushan with hatred. If not for her secret technique, he was confident that he could suppress this woman. However, a secret technique had changed the entire situation. This was the might of a secret technique and he had to obtain it. Suddenly, Wendy Yushan turned to the east, where Scholar New Moon had torn through the void and walked out. He looked to be in a very sorry state and was not much better off than Puyu. His abdomen was dyed red with blood and his face was extremely pale. When she saw Scholar New Moon, another money bomb appeared in Wendy Yushan's hand. Back on planet Pyrolite, Lu Yin had given it to Wendy Yushan when she had faced Night King Gu and Long Yun. It was an unupgraded money bomb and now Wendy Yushan had taken it out. When he saw the money bomb, Scholar New Moon's expression changed, and his eyes filled with endless fear. This weapon alone was not enough to threaten him, but if it was combined with a secret technique, then even Scholar New Moon was not completely confident that he could block it. He had experienced the might of that money bomb, and if not for the fact that he had a power vessel, he would have been seriously injured and would not have appeared again. Girl, do you think that I'll let you attack me again? You're underestimating Enlighters, Scholar New Moon threatened. Wendy Yushan's eyes narrowed, and she raised the money bomb and aimed it in an empty direction. Do you want to try? Chapter 554. Scholar New Moon's eyelids twitched and he had no confidence. The main reason was that he did not understand the secret art at all. The uniqueness of the secret art was not something that he could imagine. For countless years, the secret art had been crowned with a mystical name. The deeper the foundation of the secret art was, the deeper the fear it brought to people. This was especially true when he had just taken a hit. In his mind, once the money bomb was fired, there was a 90% chance that the power of the secret art would hit him. If he was hit again, he had no confidence that he would survive. Scholar New Moon fearfully stared at Wendy Yushan and the money bomb in her hand. Not too far away, Puyu was also staring at Wendy Yushan. Wendy Yushan's gaze was calm and she did not panic. At this moment, the more flustered she was, the easier it would be for her to be surrounded. At this moment, Lu Xiaoga appeared. Counselor Wendy, when will Brother Lu arrive? Wendy Yushan coldly replied, soon. Then why are you still leaving? Lu Xiaoga was puzzled. Wendy Yushan's eyes narrowed. He's taking my place as a representative. Lu Xiaoga nodded, looked at Puyu and smiled. Counselor Puyu, do you agree? Puyu did not respond. Lu Xiaoga looked at Wendy Yushan. It looks like Counselor Puyu doesn't agree. Counselor Wendy, you'll have to stay. Wendy Yushan's tone was indifferent. It's not up to him to disagree. Once Lu Yin comes, no one will be able to leave. These words caused Scholar New Moon and Puyu's expressions to change. Lu Yin had killed Karthika and Lei Long and now he had killed Elder Wu. This person had killed 3 Enlighters and no one knew what methods he had up his sleeves. It was too strange and Scholar New Moon did not want to face such a person alone. Wendy Yushan's secret technique was just as terrifying. Based on Wendy Yushan's current abilities, the money bomb would either target Scholar New Moon or Puyu. In any case, one of them would be the unlucky one. This made Scholar New Moon feel uncertain. He did not want to die and he still needed to think of a way to obtain the secret technique. Scholar New Moon left without another word. This made Puyu's expression turn ugly. Without Scholar New Moon, he would have to face Wendy Yushan and her weapon alone. He felt as if his life and death were in her hands. When she saw Scholar New Moon leave, Wendy Yushan inwardly sighed in relief. She had been intimidated and that was good. The situation had been resolved, and as long as she returned to the Great Yu Empire, she would be safe. Wendy Yushan looked at Puyu, her eyes filled with murderous intent. Puyu's expression changed and he stared at her warily. At the same time he said, Wendy, we're both members of the Outerverse Youth Council. My death won't do you any good. Wendy Yushan's eyes flickered and she suddenly looked at Lu Xiaoga. Thank you for telling us about Elder Wu and Scholar New Moon's plot. The Great Yu Empire will remember this favor. She then put away the money bomb and flew out of San Dios. Lu Xiaoga was stunned. He hadn't expected Wendy Yushan to make such a move. Puyu looked at Lu Xiaoga and the look in his eyes changed to one of extreme hatred. However, he did not say a single word. Instead he turned and left. Lu Xiaoga felt helpless. He had wanted to use Lu Yin's strength to get rid of Puyu, but Puyu was no fool. Once Lu Xiaoga's plan to kill Puyu had been resolved, Puyu would immediately deal with Lu Xiaoga. Lu Xiaoga exhaled and stretched his shoulders. The corner of his mouth curled up. Interesting. On Shuda planet, Lu Yin finally arrived at the location where he had hidden his spacecraft after several days of trekking. At this point, there was more than one powerhouse from Darkstar Gorge searching for him on this planet. Aside from the Peak Hunter, there were at least 2 other hunters searching for him. Lu Yin boarded his spacecraft and immediately activated it. The spacecraft shuddered for a moment before suddenly charging into outer space. Not too far away, a hunter saw the spacecraft take off and immediately attacked. Regardless of whether they were cultivators or miners, all of Shuda planet's cultivators had been locked up in the mining city, so Lu Yin was the only one who could leave at this time. The hunter unleashed countless attacks at the spacecraft in an attempt to knock Lu Yin down. However, Lu Yin fused the 3 grains of fates and together, forming a clump of dirt that forcefully blocked the hunter's attacks. He then fired a shot, and the bullet distorted the void as it transformed into a powerful attack that even Enlighters feared as it shot towards the hunter. The hunter was shocked and hurriedly dodged. If he was prepared, then the speed of the bullet would not be able to reach him. The bullet tore through the void and entered the ground before piercing through the entire Shuda planet. Shuda planet began to destabilize. Lu Yin did not have the time to care about this. The moment the hunter dodged, Lu Yin's spacecraft shot into outer space and quickly headed north. However, not long after Lu Yin's spacecraft entered outer space, another spacecraft rose up and chased after Lu Yin. It was also a radiant-grade aurora. From the rune lines in his eyes, Lu Yin knew that it was the peak hunter who was chasing after him. He cursed inwardly. There was no end to this. This person was determined to kill Lu Yin, and it should be related to Elder Wu. However, both spacecraft were radiant-grade, so it would not be easy for this person to catch up to Lu Yin. Right now, Lu Yin's greatest worry was that Top Mist would reveal all of his methods to the public. If that happened, then those Enlighters would be on guard against him. Even a hunter could pose a threat to him, let alone an Enlighter. Even if they couldn't break through his universal armor's defenses, they could still capture him. At that moment his gadget rang. It was Wendy Yushan, and Lu Yin accepted the call. After a while, Lu Yin hung up and fell into deep thought. Wendy Yushan had described the battle at San Daoist in detail, and Lu Yin felt as if he had woken up from a dream. He had completely forgotten about the secret art. Even if these people were on guard against progenitor Wushang's hide, they would not be able to guard against the secret art. Secret techniques were impossible to guard against. Lu Yin was with Wendy Yushan, and with her secret technique, she could easily transfer her gun's attacks to these Enlighters. Lu Yin was delighted. He and Wendy Yushan were not much of a threat individually, but together he could use his Dai's 3 pips to upgrade his weapon and the secret art to pose a threat to any powerhouse. As he thought about this, Lu Yin checked his star chart and sent Wendy a set of coordinates. He told her to wait there while the two of them met up. Top Mist would definitely spread the news of Lu Yin's methods, and the Enlighters would definitely not let him off. If even a hunter dared to chase after him, then the Enlighters would definitely do the same. What Lu Yin wanted to do now was join forces with Wendy Yushan to teach these Enlighters a lesson and teach them how to behave. At this time, the more he tried to hide, the more those Enlighters would feel that he was lacking in confidence. They would definitely head to the Great Yu Empire to cause trouble for him, and there would be more than one of them. Only by standing out and standing side by side with these people would he be able to instill fear in them. Scholar New Moon would definitely not spread the news of his defeat, so they could only spread the news themselves. They would tell others that Lu Yin had not only relied on one method, but also had an unbreakable attack, which was a secret technique. He looked back and saw that the peak hunter was still chasing after him. Lu Yin had set the coordinates since he wanted to meet up with Wendy, and it would be a good opportunity for him to experiment on this fellow. It was a good plan, but Lu Yin had underestimated Darkstar Gorge's strength. As the leading power of Adonis Weave, they were one of the few powers that had Enlighters, and they had people all over the surrounding weaves. Lu Yin's route had long since been confirmed, and there was a warship waiting in front of him. Lu Yin's heart sank when he saw them, as a beam of light was heading straight for him. He was very familiar with this beam of light. Back at Dark Mist Weave's pirate port, he had been severely injured and knocked unconscious by this beam of light. After that, he had been treated like a piece of white meat and left on Driftcharge planet. Now he was facing this beam of light again, and it was powerful enough to kill a hunter. Unlike a hunter's attack, this beam of light had a very wide range and even fates and could not block it. Furthermore, there was more than one beam of light, and these beams almost filled the entire region. Boom. There was a loud explosion as Lu Yin's spacecraft was destroyed. He was wearing his universal armor as he stood tall in outer space. All around him were Darkstar Gorge's warships, and behind him the peak hunter had already caught up. "Seventh bro, I'll take you to a planet," the monkey said as his shadow pulled Lu Yin towards a dark planet not too far away. The next moment, several more beams of light swept out, and one of them struck Lu Yin's body directly. This beam of light was not enough to destroy his universal armor, but it was enough to create a powerful thrust that pushed him towards another planet. This planet looked very strange as its surface was covered in red, most likely lava. The planet's core had cracked open but it had not exploded. Lu Yin felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity when he saw the planet, and the light beams thrust slammed him into the planet's surface. The moment he touched the surface, Lu Yin recalled that this planet was one of the Neo-Human Alliance's strongholds in the Outerverse. Back when he had used possession on his die to enter the body of a specter, that specter had a very high status and knew of many of the Neo-Human Alliance's strongholds. Not only did he know about the Innerverse but he also knew about the Starfall Sea, the Cosmic Sea and even the Outerverse. This planet's appearance was very strange, so it was easy for him to remember it. He remembered that the specter's impression of this planet was that it was devoid of life and seemed to be on the verge of destruction. That was why no one cared about it, and the Neo-Human Alliance's stronghold was at the planet's core. Lu Yin's surroundings grew hotter and hotter as he was slammed into the lava. Everything around him was a reddish-black color. His eyes filled with star energy as he looked at the planet's core, but it was too far away for him to see. At that moment he felt a pressure above his head as a powerful attack descended. Without thinking he immediately charged towards the planet's core. "Seventh bro, don't get caught. Otherwise it'll be troublesome." The monkey was anxious. Lu Yin replied, "They won't be able to catch me." There was a boom and the surface behind him exploded. The peak hunter appeared with his eyes closed as he swung his blade at Lu Yin. Lu Yin dodged to the side, but the powerful attack tore through the ground and headed straight for the planet's core. Lu Yin sped up. The hunter followed closely behind. He was Elder Wu's son and he had to make Lu Yin pay with his own blood. After a while, Lu Yin suddenly felt that his surroundings were no longer scorching hot, and he knew that he was very close to the planet's core. A fierce attack descended from behind him but he did not dodge. He allowed the attack to smash into his back, and it transformed into a powerful force that pushed him towards the planet's core. There was a thump and Lu Yin crashed into an empty space. Before he could see his surroundings clearly he crashed into something else and he vaguely heard a strange roar. Lu Yin moved and his universal armor collided with the ground with a metallic grating sound. He looked up and saw a pair of scarlet eyes only a few centimeters away from him. Lu Yin was startled and hurriedly retreated, his face pale. The monkey was also startled. What the hell? It was a corpse king in front of him. Chapter 555. The corpse king glared at Lu Yin with its scarlet eyes and raised its rotting arms to grab at Lu Yin, but Lu Yin casually pushed it away. He looked around and saw that this place was probably some sort of laboratory. There was a large hole above his head and he had been forcefully smashed in. There were quite a few blue crystals piled up in the laboratory. These crystals could help cultivators display water-type battle techniques, and some corpse kings could gain this innate gift by eating these crystals. Back on Earth outside of Jinlin City, Lu Yin had encountered such a corpse king, which was exactly what the Neo-Human Alliance needed. This was indeed a stronghold of the Neo-Human Alliance. The ground trembled as dust fell from above. Lu Yin looked up and saw quite a few rune lines converging. The hunter from Darkstar Gorge had been entangled by the Neo-Human Alliance. Any Neo-Human Alliance stronghold was not simple, and they all had at least one hunter overseeing it. It would not be easy for this person to destroy the stronghold. The corpse king roared again and charged at Lu Yin. Lu Yin frowned and exerted a bit of strength with his palm, instantly killing the corpse king. Although he was using the Neo-Human Alliance to attack Darkstar Gorge, the Neo-Human Alliance itself was a great enemy of the human race, and they had to be destroyed if they encountered a corpse king. Lu Yin blasted open the laboratory and looked outside. There were more than 10 laboratories and he walked through them one by one to eliminate all of the corpse kings. After leaving the final laboratory he looked up again and saw that some of the rune lines had disappeared. This stronghold was not very powerful and even if it had a hunter, it was not a peak hunter, let alone a corpse king. It could not stop Darkstar Gorge, so Lu Yin decided to lend them a hand. Lu Yin had only taken a few steps when he suddenly felt his scalp go numb. His domain had inexplicably collapsed, and an indescribable chill swept through his body. He could not help but tremble and his eyes immediately filled with star energy as he scanned his surroundings. Finally, he looked beneath his feet and saw an indescribably boundless amount of rune lines. There were even more than Karthika, Lei Long and Elder Wu. There was an enlighter here. Lu Yin's pupils shrank. What the hell, there was actually such a powerhouse here. He raised a hand and blasted apart the building above his head before charging forward. This planet was very strange. The lava was being repelled from the inside by a force that did not belong to the Neo-Human Alliance. When they had first found this planet, it had already been like this. The most important reason why they had chosen this planet as their stronghold was because there was something at the planet's core that was worth studying. A dried corpse. A corpse that had been dried for countless years had formed an aura that repelled the magma, greatly reducing the lifespan of the planet. The location of this mummy was the core of the planet. Lu Yin's previous position was only 100 meters away from the mummy. In the Earth's core, the originally motionless corpse suddenly opened its eyes. Ancient bloodline discovered. Mission target confirmed. Lu Yin rushed out from the upper levels of the geocentric laboratory and fled in panic. In the distance, the hunter from Darkstar Gorge was currently engaged in a fierce battle with a Hunter Realm Corpse King. When he saw Lu Yin, he shouted, "You can't escape." Lu Yin looked back, but he wasn't looking at the person from Darkstar Gorge. Instead, he was looking at the ground. The rune lines expanded once again and a chill ran down his spine. "Lu Yin, I want you to pay with your blood. Sacrifice my father's spirit." The powerhouse from Darkstar Gorge shouted with a sinister look in his eyes. Lu Yin looked at the man from Darkstar Gorge and gritted his teeth. "Don't chase me." "There's an even more ruthless one down there. Deal with him first." The man from Darkstar Gorge subconsciously looked down and his pupils shrank. At the same time, Lu Yin looked down as well and his pupils shrank as well. The monkey cried out, "Run, seventh bro." The Hunter Realm Corpse King that had been fighting with the man from Darkstar Gorge had its head crushed by something that looked like a desiccated corpse. The headless corpse was swaying in its hand, and it looked extremely horrifying in the darkness of the underground. It looked like an evil spirit. The desiccated corpse's eyes were dark and lusterless as it stared at Lu Yin. Lu Yin's face went pale. This thing was staring at him and it wanted to kill him. What was going on? Why had such a freak appeared out of nowhere? The man from Darkstar Gorge also went pale. He could sense an aura that surpassed his father's from the desiccated corpse. This was a terrifying powerhouse with a power level of over 200,000, and it was a monster that the Neo-Human Alliance had researched. Lu Yin and the man from Darkstar Gorge didn't have the time to bother with each other. They both kept their heads down as they fled, breaking through the ground and rushing to the surface. The desiccated corpse put down the Corpse King and slowly turned its head. Perhaps it had not moved for too long, but its neck made a cracking sound. Then its forelimbs moved and its knees bent. With a bang, its entire body broke through the ground and chased after Lu Yin with unstoppable force. The man from Darkstar Gorge tore through the void, intending to leave. Lu Yin saw him and took out Progenitor Wuxiang's hide, shouting, "Hey!" The man from Darkstar Gorge subconsciously looked over and saw Progenitor Wuxiang's hide. His mind trembled. This person had been on guard against all sorts of attacks, but he had still been careless in the face of death and had been ambushed by Lu Yin. However, Lu Yin did not plan on killing him. He just wanted to run faster than this person. The man from Darkstar Gorge was stunned for less than 2 seconds, and he quickly regained his senses. By then he could no longer see Lu Yin's figure. His eyes were filled with hatred as he tore through the void and stepped into it. He was a hunter, so he could move through the void. But just as his other foot was about to step into the void, he felt something tighten around his back, followed by an intense pain. In that instant he saw his back. How can I see my back? And behind me is that desiccated corpse. The man from Darkstar Gorge's head had been twisted off and tossed away. The desiccated corpse only paused for a moment before charging towards the surface. The peak hunter from Darkstar Gorge had been killed without even being able to put up a fight. However, he could be considered lucky since he had not suffered much. Based on the number of rune lines on the desiccated corpse, Lu Yin knew that the man from Darkstar Gorge would not be able to delay him for much longer. Thus, he tossed out the source box as soon as he reached the surface and leaped into the distance. With a flick of his finger, the box opened and the formless danger from the source box appeared once more. At the same time, Lu Yin released his domain to search for the man from Darkstar Gorge's spacecraft. Seventh bro, that thing came out, the monkey shouted in horror. Lu Yin gritted his teeth. Let's go to outer space. The monkey then transformed into a shadow and pulled him towards outer space. On the surface, the desiccated corpse walked out. The formless danger from the source box enveloped the area, causing it to stop. Lu Yin looked back and saw that the desiccated corpse had been restrained by the formless danger. He heaved a sigh of relief, and the monkey used the fastest speed he had ever used in his entire life to escape. The desiccated corpse raised its eyes, which seemed capable of swallowing light, and fixed them on the source box within the box. It glanced over and then leaped up. Lu Yin's eyes widened as he watched the formless danger from the source box completely envelop the desiccated corpse with rune lines. However, the desiccated corpse was not harmed as he had expected. The formless danger that Elder Wu and Topmist had feared could not harm the desiccated corpse at all. Lu Yin's scalp went numb and he raised his gun and fired. The bullet was not very fast and a hunter could dodge it if they were prepared. However, the desiccated corpse did not dodge and the bullet embedded itself in its chest. It was completely ineffective, and the desiccated corpse only paused for a moment before charging towards Lu Yin again. Hurry up. Lu Yin was furious. The monkey shrieked, You're still blaming me? It's all your fault. What did you provoke? I even used the strength of my reincarnation but I still couldn't outrun that thing. The desiccated corpse was not very fast, but every step it took traversed through space. This was different from tearing through the void and it was also different from Tianho's fusion into the void. It was as if the desiccated corpse was stepping on space itself. As the desiccated corpse approached, Lu Yin helplessly took out the small piece of progenitor Wuxiang's hide that he had obtained from the monkey and aimed it at the desiccated corpse. The desiccated corpse's dark eyes saw progenitor Wuxiang's hide, and its body suddenly stopped. Lu Yin saw that it was useful, and he gritted his teeth and tossed the hide onto the desiccated corpse's head to seal its eyes. Progenitor Wuxiang's hide would only intimidate an enlighter for 1 or 2 seconds, and they would only be able to look away after that. It was the same for the desiccated corpse, so Lu Yin could only let the desiccated corpse stare at progenitor Wuxiang's hide and continue intimidating it. Fortunately, the desiccated corpse was not human, and it did not seem to have any intelligence. Humans might know how to remove progenitor Wuxiang's hide, but the desiccated corpse might not. Lu Yin was taking a gamble as he had no other choice. This desiccated corpse was too strange. The monkey did not have time to feel sorry for the desiccated corpse as it dragged Lu Yin towards a warship in outer space. As for the desiccated corpse, its head was covered by progenitor Wuxiang's hide, and it was frozen in space. In front of them, beams of light shot over and the monkey roared, How dare you attack me? I'll fight you to the death. It seemed to erupt with all of its potential as it forcibly dodged the beams of light and charged into one of the warships, smashing a large hole in its hull. Inside the warship, the Darkstar Gorge cultivators all charged towards Lu Yin. Lu Yin was wearing his universal armor, and he raised his hand and unleashed 30 stacks, causing the warship to crack apart. An explorer tried to slash at him with his blade, but Lu Yin crushed the blade before grabbing the explorer by the neck and slamming him into the bottom of the ship. Lu Yin did not have the time to waste on these people, and he released his domain to search for a suitable location for the ship. He then violently smashed through the walls to search for the ship. In outer space, the desiccated corpse was still frozen in place, not moving at all. It opened its eyes and stared at progenitor Wuxiang's hide. Anyone who saw progenitor Wuxiang's hide would be intimidated, but the desiccated corpse would not close its eyes, nor would it remove progenitor Wuxiang's hide. It had formed a vicious cycle. Lu Yin found a personal spacecraft, and although it was not an aurora, it was not much slower than a radiant-grade aurora. The only difference was that it could not be upgraded. Lu Yin boarded the spacecraft and charged into outer space, heading towards the coordinates that he had agreed upon with Wendy Yushan. There were several warships in outer space but none of them were able to stop him. By the time Lu Yin entered the planet, the encirclement had already disappeared. They could only watch helplessly as Lu Yin boarded his spacecraft and left. In outer space, several explorers appeared. They were all powerhouses who had been tasked with guarding the warships, and now that Lu Yin had escaped, they could not report back to their superiors. They had to find the hunter who had been chasing after Lu Yin. In outer space, the desiccated corpse covered with progenitor Wuxiang's hide attracted a few people's attention. Several explorers flew over to the desiccated corpse, and when they saw progenitor Wuxiang's hide, they felt dizzy and fell to the ground. The next moment the warship fired a beam of light at the desiccated corpse. The people inside the warship thought that the explorers had been attacked. Chapter 556. The beam slammed into the corpse's body and smashed it into the planet. Progenitor Wuxiang's hide shifted slightly and no longer blocked the corpse's eyes. In other words, the corpse was no longer intimidated by the beam. High up in the sky, beams of light descended and bombarded the corpse. The desiccated corpse looked up, its eyes without a single ray of light causing one to feel a chill. It rushed into the starry sky and broke through the light beam alone, shattering a warship. Immediately after, the warships in the surrounding Darkstar Gorge were all destroyed and no one inside survived. Everyone in Darkstar Gorge who had attacked Lu Yin had died, and only the corpse remained in space. Progenitor Wuxiang's hide was still covering its head, making it look rather ridiculous. Bloodline of the Ancients. Kill. The mummy's mechanical voice rang out as it walked step by step through space towards Lu Yin's location. In the darkness of outer space, Lu Yin sat in his spacecraft and panted heavily. The monkey tattoo on his arm also panted in a comical manner. The corpse's existence made them feel like they had seen a ghost. This thing was much more terrifying than a corpse king, even if the latter looked disgusting. Seventh bro, can you stop provoking such a thing? Look at what you've provoked in the past. A corpse king that can transform into a corpse king, an island that screams like a vengeful ghost, and this time a corpse. I was wondering why you always provoked such strange things. The monkey grumbled. Lu Yin barked. Shut up. Did I provoke it? That thing ran out on its own. Either way, it definitely has something to do with you. I just have this feeling. Lu Yin couldn't be bothered with the monkey. He looked back and relaxed as no one had chased after him. He was lucky to have found this fast spacecraft, or else he would have died there. Right, progenitor Wuxiang's hide. Seventh bro, give it back to me. The monkey suddenly remembered and shouted. Lu Yin rolled his eyes and directly blocked the monkey. It was the monkey's turn to feel heartache. Progenitor Wuxiang's hide had been his spoils of war, and it had helped him a lot. Now that it had been lost, he felt more heartache than anyone else. The only consolation was that there was an even bigger one. As for the progenitor Wuxiang's inheritance that the monkey had mentioned, Lu Yin didn't care. That sort of inheritance was in the astral beast domain, and he would be courting death if he went there. Although his heart ached, it was worth it to trade a piece of progenitor Wuxiang's hide for his life. Lu Yin sighed as he looked at the dark sky. The universe was too vast, and any random planet in the outerverse could produce such a creature. This creature was definitely much stronger than an ordinary enlighter, and the outerverse was in trouble. Fortunately, the outerverse was vast, so this thing would not be able to find him. The coordinates that he had agreed upon with Wendy Yushan were at the edge of Dark Mist Weave. Lu Yin looked at the distance and realized that he was already at the edge of Dark Mist Weave, so it would take him at most half a day to reach his destination. He closed his eyes and decided to rest for a while. He hadn't had a good rest during this period. Right, Elder Wu's cosmic ring. Lu Yin suddenly thought of his spoils of war and he couldn't wait to check it out. However, the spacecraft was too small and he couldn't fit anything into it. He would have to wait until they met up. After an unknown amount of time, his gadget beeped, waking him up. Lu Yin rubbed his head and checked his position. He was less than an hour away from meeting up with Wendy. He looked at his gadget and his eyes flashed. It was Lu Xiaoga. Brother Lu, congratulations on resolving the situation. Lu Xiaoga's voice sounded from the gadget. Lu Yin smiled. I still have to thank you for your help. Without you, I might not have been able to escape. There's a saying that goes, the heavens help the worthy. Brother Lu is not a short-lived person. Even without me, you would have been able to avoid the situation, Lu Xiaoga said with a smile. Lu Yin's lips curled up. Wendy Yushan had told him that she had set Lu Xiaoga up before she left, and he admired her actions. Lu Xiaoga had not told him about Puyu's plot for Lu Yin's sake, but rather because he wanted to use Lu Yin to fight against Darkstar Gorge. It would be best if he could eliminate Puyu so that he could control Sandios. Lu Xiaoga's ambitions had never been hidden. To Lu Xiaoga, it didn't matter if Darkstar Gorge's alliance with Scholar New Moon failed or if Lu Yin failed. All he wanted was to sit back and watch. Unfortunately, Wendy Yushan's words had dragged him into the tiger's den, and he was now hated by Puyu. This helped Lu Yin vent his anger. Some people thought that they were smart and could control the fates of others, but in the end they would only end up getting caught in their own trap. Lu Yin had suffered such a loss before, and now it was Lu Xiaoga's turn. Brother Lu's luck isn't bad to be able to gain Night King Zhenwu's recognition. Back when you were taken away by Qingyu, I thought that we would never meet again. Lu Yin smiled. Lu Xiaoga sighed. That's right. The inner-verse day-night flow zone and the outer-verse border weaves are too far apart, but Brother Lu still managed to walk out of that place. Brother Lu, I have to admire you. Lu Yin smiled but did not say anything. He was waiting for Lu Xiaoga to start the conversation. But Brother Lu, there are some things that you did not do properly. I kindly reminded you of the situation, but you sold me out in the end. Now Puyu is looking at me like he wants to bite me. Lu Xiaoga's smile faded. Lu Yin was surprised. What? Did something happen? Brother Lu, you don't know? I've always been in the dark mist weave, so I don't know what happened in Sandios. If that's the case, then I've blamed the wrong person, Lu Xiaoga said helplessly. Lu Yin smiled. Brother Lu, Wendy can be a little too straightforward at times. I hope that Brother Lu doesn't mind. Lu Xiaoga's tone became relaxed again. As long as Brother Lu didn't deliberately scheme against me, then it's fine. But Brother Lu, there's a saying that you should have heard before. The tallest tree in the forest will be destroyed by the wind. You killed 3 Enlighters, which is a disgrace to them. You might have been able to resolve the situation this time, but if 3 Enlighters attack you next time, will you still be able to resolve it? Lu Yin's expression turned serious, as Lu Xiaoga's words were exactly what he was worried about. However, his worries were just worries, and he would not worry too much about things that had yet to happen. This time he had met up with Wendy to let those Enlighters know that if they worked together, they could take down any powerhouse with them. Thank you for the reminder, Brother Lu, Lu Yin replied. Soon after the call ended, Lu Yin looked at his watch and saw that they were about to arrive. The rendezvous point with Wendy was only 3 filaments away from Shenwu continent, and with his spacecraft speed, they arrived in half a day. It would take Wendy about 2 days to travel from Adonis Weave to Dark Mist Weave. Lu Yin checked the situation at the rendezvous point and was shocked to see that it had actually become a training ground. Planet Woodrock was a very ordinary planet, and its civilization was still in the ancient era. The reason that he had chosen this planet to meet up with Wendy was actually a coincidence. He had randomly chosen a random location, but he had never expected that it would become a training ground in less than 10 hours. Lu Yin was too lazy to change it, and so be it. There were very few places in the Outerverse that he could not set foot in. Even if he was discovered by the organizations behind the trial takers, so what? Even the strongest person in Dark Mist Weave, Top Mist, did not dare to face him. Of course, things like dried corpses were an exception. Such things did exist, but there were not many of them. Occasionally running into one was already considered heaven-defying luck. On the mainland of planet Woodrock, a huge ancient city was ablaze. This was the capital of a country, and at this moment the city was filled with zombies. Only a small number of people had gathered together to resist the zombie attacks. Compared to the early days of Earth's apocalypse, ancient societies were much more efficient in dealing with the zombies. This was because ancient societies revered martial prowess, and even the bodies of ordinary people were much stronger than those of Earth's soldiers. Furthermore, their weapons were swords and clubs, which were very easy to obtain. This was unlike Earth's apocalypse, where everyone wanted to find guns but could not find any. The flames spread throughout the capital, and within the palace, even the emperor had been turned into a zombie. He was surrounded in the palace and burned to nothingness. Many palace guards, palace maids, eunuchs, and ministers trembled as they hid among the guards. Their expressions were filled with despair, as they had no idea what was happening. In an instant, everyone had changed and many people had turned into monsters, including the emperor. To these people, the emperor's transformation into a monster was equivalent to the sky collapsing. High up in the sky, streaks of fiery red smashed into the ground. One of the streaks smashed into the palace, causing the ground to shatter. A violent shockwave crushed half of the palace into smithereens. Countless zombies were crushed to ashes. The guards continued to slaughter the zombies as they approached. It's a divine stone. It must be a divine stone. God has come to help us. One of the ministers shouted. Around him, many of the ministers knelt down and kowtowed towards the personal spacecraft in the crater. The surrounding guards were also angrily shouted at by the ministers, and they had no choice but to kneel down and kowtow. Creak. The door of the spacecraft opened, and outside the crater, all the guards and ministers looked up in shock. They saw a young man wearing strange clothes walk out of the divine stone. One of the ministers frantically shouted, "God, please save us. Please save us, God." Many of them knelt down and kowtowed. Lu Yin looked at these people and lowered his head to activate his gadget. His brows rose. There was actually a melder with a power level close to 5,000, and there was more than one melder further away. As expected of an ancient society that revered martial prowess. Although it was far from comparable to the Shenwu continent, it was still much stronger than Earth's. After all, even the 7 sages of China had only been sentinels. Lu Yin looked up and saw another streak of fiery red flying towards him. Lu Yin narrowed his eyes and pressed down on the spacecraft with one hand. He then exerted some force, causing the spacecraft to sink into the ground. With a casual wave of his hand, he buried the area with rubble and disappeared from everyone's sight. When the ministers and guards looked up again, they could no longer see Lu Yin. Another corner of the palace was crushed by a violent shockwave, and many zombies were reduced to ashes. Another personal spacecraft appeared on the ground. This time it was a trial taker from the Dark Mistweave. The ministers and guards hurriedly ran over to the corner and saw the personal spacecraft again. There was also an open hatch, but no one inside could be seen. The trial taker had immediately left. Lu Yin stood on the roof of the palace and looked at the corner in astonishment. Under his domain nothing could be hidden. The person inside the spacecraft had quickly left the moment the hatch had opened and hid in the shadows. His movements were extremely smooth, and it was obvious that he had received training in this area. This feeling, coupled with the fact that he was in the Dark Mistweave, reminded Lu Yin of a certain profession. An assassin. Chapter 557. Many people were able to conceal themselves immediately, such as soldiers and cultivators with survival experience. However, there was one occupation that Dark Mistweave did not lack. Assassins, and the strongest assassin organization was Mafioso Planet. Mafioso Planet's status in Dark Mistweave and even the surrounding weaves was similar to the Relentless Slayer's status in Chaos Flow Zone. They had nurtured many outstanding assassins. This region was not too far from Mafioso Planet, and Lu Yin immediately thought of this planet. This batch of trial takers was most likely from Mafioso Planet. Mafioso Planet was one of the powers that coveted Shenwu continent, and it could be considered the strongest power. It was rumored that Mafioso Planet had an Enlighter realm assassin, and if Lu Yin's guess was correct, that assassin was most likely Topmist. What a coincidence! Lu Yin's gaze turned cold as Topmist had almost killed him. If this batch of trial takers really were from Mafioso Planet, then there was no need for him to leave. It was a good opportunity to have some fun before Wendy arrived. As more and more spacecraft landed, trial takers appeared in the zombie-filled capital. As long as it was a trial, there would be missions. During Earth's trial, the most important mission had been to capture Qingyu. It had been an extremely difficult mission, and Lu Yin still remembered it clearly. Regardless of the commotion outside, Lu Yin sealed off one of the palaces and then took out Elder Wu's cosmic ring. He used Elder Wu's blood to open it and release everything inside. Lu Yin was stunned when he saw Elder Wu's items. It was not that there were too many of them, but that they were too strange. The old man's cosmic ring contained many strange bottles and jars, and some of them were filled with various colored liquids that were bubbling. It was a very strange sight. "Seventh bro, are these poisons?" the monkey asked. Lu Yin's eyes filled with star energy as he looked at the jars and jars. He was immediately shocked. These jars and jars all had a large number of rune lines, and each bottle contained rune lines that were no less than a hunter's. There were even a few bottles that were close to Karthika's. Rune lines reflected an item's influence on the universe, and it was even more direct than a person's power level. In other words, these jars and jars had an influence that was close to an enlighter's. If these were all poisons, then some of them could definitely kill a hunter or even injure an enlighter. Lu Yin carefully placed the strange jars and jars to the side, storing them away for now. He had no use for them and he could not identify their effects. He would have to find someone to do so in the future. After putting away the bottles and jars, Lu Yin counted the star essence, but he was disappointed to find that there were only a little over 2,000 cubes of star essence. Elder Wu was an enlighter from the Outerverse, so it was expected that he would only have so few star essences. Aside from the star essences, Elder Wu also had several 100,000 star crystals and quite a few Mavis Bank cards. These crystal cards were of no use to him, as he had already used Elder Wu's blood to open his cosmic ring. Even if these crystal cards were given to him, he would not be able to withdraw any money from them. Lu Yin gritted his teeth. The Mavis Bank was too profitable. Who knew how many people died every year and most of the money in their crystal cards could not be withdrawn. In the end, the Mavis Bank benefited greatly. This sum was astronomical, and Lu Yin was certain that Elder Wu's Mavis Bank cards had a frightening amount of money in them since they were all gold. The Mavis Bank's crystal cards were categorized according to their colors. The lowest was green, followed by blue, black, gold, purple and red. Black and gold cards would only be issued after a certain amount of star crystals had been stored, while gold cards and above were measured in star essences. Elder Wu's cards were all gold, which meant that there were definitely quite a few crystals inside. It was a pity that they were all rotten accounts. Aside from these items, the old man's cosmic ring contained many of Shamrock Enterprises' medicines, as well as some other unknown items. Lu Yin had killed 3 enlighters and he had obtained quite a few items that he did not understand. These items were all stored in a single cosmic ring, and he would have to find someone to appraise them in the future. Anything that could be collected by an enlighter was definitely not ordinary. Now he was rather curious about the bottles and jars. The liquids and gases within them were enough to send a chill down his spine. After thinking about it, Lu Yin put them away as they might be useful in the future. He was now glad that he had not given Elder Wu a chance to attack him. Otherwise he would not have been able to withstand a single bottle. These enlighters all had life-saving methods and they had to be killed instantly. Otherwise, even with the universal armor, Lu Yin would not feel safe. He only had around 2,000 star essence on him at the moment and he sighed. This was a huge loss. However, he had used so much star essence to upgrade his polarium essence which could be sold for quite a bit. He still had 310 tons of polarium essence in his cosmic ring, which was quite a lot. There was a loud noise and many zombies appeared outside the palace that Lu Yin had sealed off, frantically smashing the door. Lu Yin frowned. Although these zombies did not have any intelligence, they were very sensitive when it came to detecting other living creatures. They had actually sensed his presence. Lu Yin opened the door to the palace, and his figure flashed as he disappeared from the encirclement of zombies. Within the capital, there was a huge brothel where many zombies dressed in alluring clothing were baring their fangs and brandishing their claws as they wandered about. There were no less than 100 people gathered in the brothel's courtyard. Some of them were brothel patrons who had stayed the night before, while others were commoners who had hidden in the brothel. There were even some rangers. A middle-aged man was squatting on the ground, trembling. He looked at the wandering zombies through the cracks in the walls, and he was very familiar with one of them. It was the woman who had spent the night with him. She had been a beautiful and charming woman, but now she had turned into a bloodthirsty monster, which almost drove the middle-aged man crazy. Bang bang bang, the huge boulder at the entrance to the courtyard made a loud noise. Many zombies had gathered outside wanting to smash the boulder and rush into the courtyard. Behind the boulder was a ranger dressed in gray robes and wielding a long spear. His expression was gloomy as he stubbornly resisted the boulder. Crack. The boulder suddenly shattered and the ranger's expression changed. He gritted his teeth and stabbed his spear through the boulder, piercing through the heads of several zombies. The tip of the spear vibrated, shattering the heads of the zombies and causing the boulder to shatter as well. Everyone, I've tried my best, but all I can do is protect myself. Everyone, please take care of yourselves, the ranger shouted. His spear moved like a dragon as it shook off the countless zombies that had gathered around him. He then stabbed the tip of his spear into the ground and abruptly flicked it upwards, sending countless rocks flying in all directions and piercing through the heads of many zombies. This single attack had destroyed the brothel and opened up a path for the commoners who had hidden themselves. The ranger helplessly looked at the commoners and sighed. He then jumped up and rushed out of the brothel. Just as he had said, all he could do was protect himself. There were simply too many monsters, and no matter how strong he was, he would eventually run out of energy. It was already very good that he had been able to open up a path for these people. As one of the most famous powerhouses on this continent, this was the best he could do. Suddenly, a cold light flashed in front of the ranger's eyes as a black fog enveloped him. He then felt a tearing pain in his neck. Instinctively, the ranger swept his spear in front of him and swept away the fog. However, his neck was also torn apart and blood spurted out as he slowly fell to the ground. The people hiding in the brothel watched this scene in horror. Next to the ranger's corpse, a pale-faced youth walked out and bent down to cut off the ranger's head. He then placed it in his cosmic ring and left without even looking at the people hiding in the brothel. The same scene was happening in many other places on the continent. This was a trial mission, an assassination trial mission. The mission was to kill the cultivators of planet Woodrock. Each person could only kill cultivators of the same level or stronger, and the final score would be determined by the number of heads killed. This was a trial of blood. Although Earth's trial had not been set up by the Great Yu Empire on purpose, the goal of the trial was not to kill but to select the elites. Both the elite trial takers and the elites of the natives such as Zhang Dingtian and Bai Shui had been chosen by the Great Yu Empire. However, Planet Woodrock's trial was specifically set up to train assassins. The training would last for a long time, and with zombies, there was a possibility of evolution. Evolution meant that there would be an endless stream of cultivators, and this planet had been chosen as a long-term trial planet. To the people of Planet Woodrock, this was very cruel. It was as if they were being raised in captivity for the trial takers to slaughter. Of course, if the natives performed well, they might be taken off the planet as well. Lu Yin put down the trial taker's corpse in his hands. He had learned everything he wanted to know, and his expression was complicated. Was he sympathetic? Perhaps, but this was the universe, and the laws of the Dark Forest did not care about whether it was cruel or not. Everyone was the hunter and everyone was the prey. Footsteps sounded behind him, and Lu Yin turned around to calmly look at the bespectacled girl walking over. She was also a trial taker. Lu Yin did not hide his tracks, as he already knew that this group of trial takers had come from Mafioso Planet. Before Wendy arrived, he would kill as many as he could as a form of revenge against Top Mist. These trial takers were assassins and they were emotionless. He did not feel guilty for killing them. However, this girl was completely different from the trial takers. I'm sorry. Please don't kill me. I'm not a bad person. Chapter 558. The bespectacled girl quickly retreated and gritted her teeth as she glared at Lu Yin. She then turned around and fled into the shadows. Lu Yin did not chase after her. He looked at the green poison on his clothes. He stared in the direction that the bespectacled girl had fled in, deep in thought. The bespectacled girl fled for 10 minutes, using all the techniques she had learned on Mafioso Planet. She was confident that even an elite Lemeter would not be able to catch up to her. Only then did she relax and hide in a corner to catch her breath. Where did this monster come from? I can't even break through his defenses and I can't even detect his power level. Is he a Melder or a Lemeter? How did he get in here? The planet should have been sealed off, the bespectacled girl muttered to herself as she patted her chest. I'm a Lemeter, a calm voice rang out in her ears. Her pupils shrank and she quickly looked to the side. Lu Yin was leaning against the wall with his arms crossed as he stared at her. The bespectacled girl's footsteps were light, and she turned around to flee without another word. This time she had fled for an entire hour, using all sorts of techniques and even disguises. Lu Yin had truly frightened her, as she was not an ordinary cultivator. Mafioso Planet had high expectations for her during this trial mission. And her mission was not to slaughter the natives, as that would not be challenging. Instead, she was to slaughter all the trial takers. Who would have thought that she would run into a monster before she could even begin? A monster that she could not even think of assassinating. Zombies roamed the streets, and the bespectacled girl truly looked like a zombie amidst the horde. She was very satisfied with her disguise, as even an ordinary explorer would not be able to find her after an hour of non-stop fleeing, much less a limiter. This was the basis of her confidence. After roaming around for a while, the bespectacled girl felt that it was enough. All the anti-tracking measures she had left behind along the way did not detect anyone approaching. Just as she was about to leave the zombie horde, she suddenly felt a gaze on her. As an assassin, she was very sensitive to gazes. She looked to her left, and around a corner 10 meters away she saw that same person again. He was still leaning against the wall leisurely, quietly watching her. Strangely, the zombies that passed by did not react to him at all. It was as if they did not know that he was there. The girl with glasses felt her scalp go numb. Even if she was a trained assassin, it was not easy to avoid the perception of zombies. Moreover, that person did not avoid it at all. He just stood in front of the zombies. What the hell? The bespectacled lady's expression was unsightly. She recalled a certain method called a domain. It was said that experts who had comprehended a domain could merge with their surroundings and completely isolate their aura. Could that man have comprehended a domain? The bespectacled girl gave up. She had already tried her best to escape, but to no avail. She stopped where she was and let the zombie horde go. She took off her mask and disguise, pushed her glasses up and asked, "What do you want?" Lu Yin looked at her. "You know a lot about poisons?" The bespectacled woman nodded. "You can say that. There are many assassination methods and poison is one of them." He casually tossed her a bottle of liquid from Elder Wu's cosmic ring. "Take a look at what this is." The bespectacled girl doubtfully took the bottle and stared at the liquid within, muttering something under her breath. Lu Yin listened for a while and realized that she was referring to similar medicinal ingredients and animal toxins. He was surprised that she could identify the ingredients of the poison just by looking at it. This was Elder Wu's poison, something that belonged to an enlightener. During this time, Lu Yin didn't allow any zombies to approach. He was very surprised that the bespectacled girl hadn't died immediately, which was a miracle for a melder. He stared at her and watched her suffer for several hours. It wasn't until the sky turned completely dark that the bespectacled girl's pain subsided. At this moment, her body was drenched and her exquisite curves were full of temptation. Her skin was faintly visible underneath, but Lu Yin didn't care about this. His eyes were filled with shock as he saw that the number of rune lines in the bespectacled girl had increased by a lot. If the bespectacled girl's rune lines represented a melder genius that could kill enemies across realms, then this girl's rune lines were no longer as simple as a melder genius. They were comparable to some limiter geniuses and should be comparable to an area master from the Astral Combat Academy. This was very shocking. Area masters from the Astral Combat Academy were absolute elites even in the Innerverse, and they were considered the most elite disciples of large organizations. Elites from the Outerverse could not compare to them. Schutz had been cultivating in the Astral Combat Academy for a long time and had been personally taught by Astral Ten's mentors, but he still hadn't reached the level of an area master. However, this girl had done so just by drinking a bottle of liquid. Lu Yin felt like he had been tricked. That bottle of liquid couldn't have been used to increase one's strength, right? When he thought of this, his expression turned ugly. The bespectacled girl's body was trembling from the intense pain she had been in for so long. She panted heavily and touched her clothes, only to find that they were completely soaked. Then she took them off right in front of Lu Yin. Lu Yin was shocked and quickly looked away. "What are you doing?" The bespectacled girl blinked. "Change your clothes." "Changing in front of me? Look if you want. I can't resist anyway." Her words made Lu Yin's heart skip a beat, but he had no choice but to turn away. The bespectacled girl's lips curled up, and she deliberately took her time after taking off her clothes. She even made a lot of noises as she put on her clothes, as if she was trying to seduce Lu Yin. Lu Yin had never experienced something like this before, so he was a little anxious. After a while, the bespectacled girl said, "I'm done." Lu Yin turned around and his eyes lit up. The bespectacled girl was wearing a very casual white dress that revealed her long white legs and a pair of small, sparkling feet. Her hair had also been tidied up and it hung down to her waist. She looked at Lu Yin with a pair of innocent and shy eyes, and she bit her lip as she rubbed her fingers together. "Do you like it? Seventh bro, she's trying to seduce you." The bespectacled girl wasn't the prettiest person Lu Yin had ever seen, but she was definitely the purest. The word purest sounded strange when used on an assassin, but it was true. She had a gentle temperament that was different from cultivators. Lu Yin frowned. "Why did that liquid increase your strength?" She pushed her glasses up. "Would you believe me if I said that it was poison?" Lu Yin's eyes narrowed. "I'm not stupid." The bespectacled girl was helpless. "Big brother, it really is poison." "Don't call me that. No matter how you change your appearance, you're still an assassin and I won't go easy on you. The better you disguise yourself, the more you prove your methods." The bespectacled girl looked at Lu Yin innocently and extended an empty bottle. "Let's do an experiment." She looked around and her star energy flowed out like water. She finally caught a six-legged creature that looked like a mouse, poured some water into the empty bottle and fed it to the creature. The next second, the creature turned to ash from the inside out, leaving not a single trace behind. Lu Yin was shocked. "I know Big Brother doesn't believe me," the bespectacled girl said before grabbing a zombie and pouring the water into its mouth. The same thing happened to the zombie and it turned to ash in less than a second. It didn't even burn. It was as if it had been decomposed by something. "This is poison, a poison that even space-exploring powerhouses can't withstand. In terms of power, it should be able to easily kill a cruiser," the bespectacled girl deduced. "Then how did you survive?" Lu Yin was surprised. The bespectacled girl smiled, and under Lu Yin's astonished gaze, her skin turned from white to green. It was a green that was obviously very poisonous, and her clothes turned to ash, leaving her naked in front of Lu Yin. Lu Yin didn't dodge this time, but he blocked the monkey. "Is this your innate gift?" The bespectacled girl nodded. "Yes, my innate gift is poison. I'm a poison person." "Put on your clothes," Lu Yin said. The bespectacled girl's green skin disappeared and she turned white again. Her skin was so white that Lu Yin couldn't help but take a second look. Chapter 559. She quickly put on her clothes. "My innate gift makes me immune to poison, and the stronger the poison I consume, the stronger my innate gift becomes." Lu Yin was amazed that such an innate gift existed. Now the question was, should he kill her? Her innate gift was very powerful and her strength would increase very quickly. Since she was from Mafioso planet, she would be an enemy in the future, and Lu Yin did not want to leave behind an enemy that could threaten him. The bespectacled girl sensed Lu Yin's killing intent and pitifully said, "Big brother, you're a good person. Can you let me go? I really haven't killed anyone." Lu Yin stared at her with a murderous glint in his eyes. Her heart trembled and she hurriedly said, "You can't kill me, Lu Yin." Lu Yin raised a brow. "You recognize me?" She nodded. "Yes, just now. Killing me won't do you any good, Lu Yin." "Have you heard of the name Top Mist?" Lu Yin asked. The bespectacled girl was shocked. "The Great Elder?" Lu Yin's lips curled up. "So he really is from Mafioso planet. Unfortunately, I have a grudge against him and I have to kill his people. Your innate gift won't allow you to live." "Wait, I can help you kill him," the bespectacled girl shouted. Lu Yin laughed. "Do you know how strong he is? Help me kill him. Wait another 500 years. He's the Great Elder of Mafioso planet and an enlighter. I know that I can't kill him right now, but I'll surpass him in the future. Besides, I have a reason to kill him," the bespectacled girl hurriedly said. "Tell me about it." Lu Yin looked at her with interest. Her eyes flickered and she thought for a moment before saying, "Mafioso planet is the top assassin organization in the surrounding weaves. They have an inherited treasure called the Bloody Handprint, which can only be inherited by the strongest person in the organization. All of the assassins in the organization want to obtain it, and it's currently in Top Mist's hands. Our organization has no emotions and we are not united. All of the assassin's ultimate goal is the Great Elder. The bloody handprint? Is it very powerful? Luyin asked. The bespectacled girl solemnly replied. According to ancient records, the bloody handprint once killed an Innerverse powerhouse with a power level of over 300,000. Luyin was shocked. Mafioso planet has something so powerful? The bespectacled woman nodded. That's Mafioso planet's most precious inherited treasure, and it can't be used unless it's a life or death situation. The right to use it is in the Great Elder's hands, so as long as the Great Elder goes all out, he'll be equivalent to an extreme powerhouse with a power level of over 300,000. However, that's only true for external forces. He's not allowed to use the blood palm on his own people. Once my strength surpasses the Great Elder's, I'll be able to replace him, and killing him will be as easy as flipping my hand. If an outsider wants to kill him, it'll be impossible unless they lure the Great Elder out of Mafioso planet. Luyin fell into deep thought. Topmist actually had such a life-saving technique, but that didn't seem right. Back on Shuda planet, Topmist's rune lines definitely weren't that terrifying. If Topmist really did have a bloody handprint, then his rune lines definitely far surpassed that of an enlighter's. An assassin like Topmist who cherished his life would definitely carry a life-saving technique with him. Since Topmist's rune lines weren't that terrifying, then there were only 3 possibilities. Either this woman was lying and there was no bloody handprint at all, or the bloody handprint would not reveal any of its power unless it exploded. The third possibility was that this bloody handprint was similar to the power vessel that Zaylin had used, and it could only be used once. At this moment, the bespectacled girl opened her gadget and tapped on a screen. Big brother, I know you don't believe me. Take a look. Luyin looked at the screen and saw an introduction that mentioned the crimson palm print. Although there weren't many words, Luyin could tell from the screen that these words weren't fake. They had been written for many years and they were very ancient. However, this didn't prove that the bloody handprint still existed. Perhaps it had already been used up after so many years. Even if this thing still exists, it's impossible for you to kill Topmist with your current strength. I don't have the time to wait around. If you really want to kill Topmist, then why don't you find someone stronger in your organization to work with? Assassins don't work with others, but I can. The bespectacled girl grew anxious as she could truly feel Luyin's killing intent. As an assassin, she was very sensitive to killing intent. The more powerful an assassin is, the less likely they are to work with others. Even the assassins trained by Mafioso planet don't have loyalty, but I do. I can serve you as long as you don't kill me and also provide me with that poison. Why should I believe you? Luyin asked coldly. The bespectacled girl replied, You don't need to believe me since I'm not a threat to you. On the contrary, you're very tempting to me because that poison is very difficult to obtain even in the Outerverse. If I want to increase my strength quickly, then I need that poison. How about this? You can use the poison to hire me and I'll work for you. She then saw the killing intent in Luyin's eyes gradually diminish and she continued, Think about it. Killing me won't do you any good, but keeping me alive will give you an opportunity to deal with Topmist in the future, right? Besides, once I get stronger, I can even help you assassinate others. This was very tempting, as the bespectacled girl had been right about one thing. The kind of poison that could allow her to rapidly increase her strength was not easy to obtain. All of the poisons that Luyin was currently using had been created by Elder Wu, an enlighter. There were many enlighters in the Outerverse, but how many of them knew how to create poisons? The probability was too low. Although this woman's existence was neither too big nor too small of a threat, the best way for her to increase her strength was in Luyin's hands. As long as he could control her, Luyin did not believe that she would be able to increase her strength as quickly as he did. How long is your trial mission? Luyin asked. The bespectacled girl immediately replied, 1 month for me, but it's much longer for others. Luyin nodded. All right. You have to come to the Great U Empire's Xenu Star to meet me within 3 months. If you don't, then I'll treat it as you going back on your word and you'll never be able to obtain these poisons. Also, if I ever see you in the future, I'll definitely kill you. The bespectacled girl relaxed as she knew that she would not die. Don't worry, these poisons are far more tempting to me than you can imagine. I'll definitely look for you. You just drank a bottle of my poison, so treat it as payment for hiring me. I haven't decided who I'll kill yet, but I've already paid you, so don't go back on your word, Lu Yin said calmly. The bespectacled girl nodded and patted her chest carefully. Thank you, big brother. I told you not to call me that. Lu Yin frowned. This form of address, as well as all of her previous actions, had dispelled his killing intent. Lu Yin knew that, but there was still one thing that had ultimately dispelled his killing intent. This woman. There was no benefit in killing her, and keeping her alive would not pose much of a threat. It was better to keep her alive, as she might actually be useful in the future. Although consuming poison could increase one's strength quickly, there were also many restrictions. It would not increase one's overall strength, and such a person would never be able to become a top powerhouse. The bespectacled girl left, but before she left, she told Lu Yin that her name was Miss Child. There were 7 Miss Children on Mafioso Planet, and they were the top assassins within their realm. She was a Melder Miss Child, and below her were the Sentinel Miss Children. Above her were the Limiters, Explorers, Cruisers, Hunters, and the Top Enlighters. Currently, there was only one Enlighter on Mafioso Planet, and that was Top Mist. Naturally, he was also a Miss Child. All of the Miss Children's ultimate goal was to become an Enlighter Miss Child. This was a tradition that had existed for countless years on Mafioso Planet, and no one could change it. The bespectacled girl had probably said all of this to express her sincerity to Lu Yin, as she was afraid that he would go back on his word and kill her. However, she was overthinking things. Since Lu Yin had promised not to kill her, then he would not kill her. He would not go so far as to deceive a woman even if she was an assassin. The most important thing for an assassin was to seek fortune and avoid calamity. The bespectacled girl's mission was to slaughter all of the trial takers, but Lu Yin's existence had prevented her from doing so. She had not moved until 2 days later when Lu Yin boarded a spacecraft and entered outer space. Only then did she bare her fangs and begin to slaughter the trial takers. The bespectacled girl looked up at the sky with a profound gaze. She was different from the average assassin who was simple-minded and well-developed. What she had always wanted was not a terrifying reputation, but rather the entirety of Mafioso Planet. She had her own ambitions. Lu Yin's appearance was a perfect opportunity for her to ally with him. She could help Lu Yin while also using him to help herself. Although cooperating with Lu Yin would be like asking a tiger for its skin, and her life would be in his hands, she had no other choice. This person actually had a poison that she could not extricate herself from, and it was only with that poison that she could rapidly increase her strength. The future would always belong to their generation, and since that was the case, she would cooperate with the strongest person of her generation. This person was not only the strongest person of his generation in the Outerverse, but he was also the strongest person of his generation in the entire universe. In outer space, Lu Yin ended his call with Wendy Yushan. He wanted to go to Shenwu Continent's space station with Wendy Yushan because he wanted to understand the current situation on Shenwu Continent. He had killed 3 Enlighters, which was too much of an eyesore to the other Enlighters. Their dignity had been challenged, and under these circumstances he needed to appear. The more frequently he appeared, the less scruples he would have, and the more apprehensive those Enlighters who wanted to deal with him would be. Wendy Yushan did not know why Lu Yin wanted to go to Shenwu Continent, but she had to follow him wherever he went. Only the 2 of them could pose a threat to any powerhouse. The Outerverse was connected to the Astral Wilderness, and to the east was the Astral Beast Domain. There was a weave in the Outerverse called Ironblood Weave, and this weave was one of the points that connected the Outerverse and the Astral Beast Domain. Ironblood Weave was purely a war zone, and there were no civilians. All of the habitable planets in the weave had been connected to form war fortresses. These war fortresses divided the entire Ironblood Weave and stretched out the battlefront to wage a never-ending war with the Astral Beast Domain. This was to prevent the Astral Beast Domain's astral beasts from breaking into other weaves. Countless years ago, all of the living people in Ironblood Weave had been massacred. Now the ones fighting in the weave were cultivators from other weaves or from the Innerverse. Just like Ironblood Weave, the Astral Beast Domain had also suffered heavy losses. Countless astral beasts had died over the years, and many races had even been exterminated. Thus, even though the Astral Beast Domain and the Human Domain had reached a peace agreement, there would still be endless war in this place unless one side was permanently exterminated. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.